Chapter 2865. When the five of them struck out, the pale-faced Saint Sun Wu Hua hovered in the distance. He stared at Jianqin without blinking at all. He was extremely confident in his strength. Although he was only an early divine king, the fusion of the laws of space and the laws of time made his battle prowess far greater than others of the same level. After using the world of worlds, even mid-divine king experts would not be his opponent. However, he had actually failed to endure a single strike from Jianqin despite being confident in himself. As a result, Jianqin immediately became unfathomable in his eyes. Yang Yutian is just too powerful. I wonder if he can endure the attacks of 5 primordial realm experts, thought Saint Sun Wu Hua. A sliver of eagerness appeared in his eyes, as if he wanted to see Yang Yutian's true strength through this battle. On the other side, Jianqin's eyes were filled with almost undetectable mockery when he sensed the 5 powerful attacks from the surroundings. In the eyes of Chu Jie and the others, the attacks of the primordial realm were their greatest trump card against the Dark Star race. However, they were nothing in Jianqin's eyes. With the toughness of his chaotic body, even if he stood there without any defenses, the primordial realm attacks from the formation of the Divine King's Death Warriors would not be able to harm him at all. This was because attacks from first heavenly layer infinite primes were unable to get through the chaotic body. They would not even be able to leave a scratch on his skin. However, with Saint Sun Wu Hua watching from the side, Jianqin naturally could not use his battle prowess at the primordial realm. Just when the attacks were about to arrive, Jianqin stabbed out 5 times with lightning speed with a supreme quality, Saint Artifact, sword in his hand. Every single strike shone with light, and they moved extremely quickly. In particular, when Jianqin purposefully used the laws of space at the Divine King's level, it seemed like he had only stabbed out once, but 5 streaks of light had appeared. Boom! 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 Jianqin's 5 strands of sword qi collided with the attacks from Chu Jie and the others loudly. With a great rumble, a terrifying storm of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings. Jianqin's sword qi was forcefully dispersed by the powerful attacks from the 5 primordial realm experts. Chu Jie and the others' attacks weakened slightly after being nullified by the sword qi. Afterwards, they struck Jianqin with the remaining power. Bang! With a loud boom, Jianqin was struck and fell to the ground. His white robe had already turned into ashes, revealing a soft leather armor underneath. The leather armor was also a supreme quality saint artifact, but under the attacks of the 5 primordial realm experts, it had become damaged. It was basically useless now. I never thought you would actually have a supreme quality saint artifact on you. I've underestimated an independent cultivator like you a little. However, even if you have a supreme quality saint artifact, it won't be able to change anything today. It can only last you for a while longer. Yang Yutian, did you never think that a day like this would come? Chu Jie sneered. When the 5 of them attacked Jianqin, they had also used the power of the primordial realm to disturb the space there, causing it to become unstable and making it difficult to use the laws of space. This was to prevent Yang Yutian from using the laws of space to escape. Chu Jie, what's the point of saying so much nonsense? The 100 Saints City will learn about the battle here very soon. Once Jin Hong and the others make it here, it won't be so easy for us to kill Yang Yutian. If we want to kill him, we need to be fast, Gong Rui said coldly. Gong Rui said coldly. The power of the primordial realm gathered around him. He seemed to have fused with the God King loyalists as he used everyone's power to send a strand of sword qi towards Jianqin. Don't worry. With the 5 of us working together, Yang Yutian is dead for sure. Killing him won't take too long. He won't be able to last until reinforcements arrive, Chu Jie laughed out loud. Afterwards, he and the others charged towards Jianqin in an encirclement. All of their eyes were filled with heavy killing intent. They were extremely determined to kill Jianqin. A cold light flashed through Jianqin's eyes. Today was the perfect time to kill Chu Jie and the others. However, with Saint Wu Hua watching from the side, it was inconvenient for him to display his true strength, just in case something happened. Saint Wu Hua is the disciple of the Point Cloud Venerable, and the Point Cloud Venerable has assisted me several times in the past. As a result, he obviously can't kill his disciple. However, if he doesn't kill him, he'll be able to see my true strength clearly once I display it. Once the Dark Star race learns of this, it'll be bad for me instead. Even my identity as the Fifth Hall Master will be exposed. If I continue to hide my strength, it'll be impossible for me to kill Chu Jie and the others today. Jian Chen weighed his options. During this time, he clashed with the 5 of them again. In order to hide his strength properly, he was forced to shatter his supreme quality, Saint Artifact, to pieces. At the same time, he had to create some wounds on himself to make it seem like he was heavily injured. That was the only way to avoid suspicion. Otherwise, it would be far too shocking for a divine king to emerge and scathe from the attacks of 5 primordial realm experts. Only those who had reached the peak of the divine king realm and ranked in the top 10 of the divine king realm could achieve something like that. It looks like I can only imprison Saint Wu Hua and release him when I leave the Dark Star world, thought Jian Chen. This was the only feasible method he could think of. However, just when he was about to do that, he suddenly sensed something. The senses of his soul discovered a figure flying over extremely quickly from the direction of the 100 Saint City. He had no idea what secret technique he had used, but he was actually astonishingly fast. With his cultivation as a mid-divine king, he was actually able to erupt with speed that was no slower than a primordial realm expert. He tore through space and crossed 1,000 kilometers in a single instance. Jin Hong has actually come. Jian Chen frowned. Jin Hong was the successor of a Grand Exalt. No one knew just how many powerful ancient secret techniques he had inherited, so it was not strange for him to possess such speed. However, with that, his plan to imprison Saint Wu Hua and kill Chu Jie and the others with his battle prowess as a primordial realm expert was no longer feasible. Looks like I can only last a little longer. Jian Chen felt helpless inside. Jin Hong's arrival forced him to continue with his act. Blood spurted from his mouth as his presence plummeted. His face was sheet white, as if he was heavily injured and on the brink of death. Ha ha ha, he can't last much longer. He's about to die. Chu Jie laughed viciously as he attacked Jian Chen viciously. He was overjoyed when he saw how Yang Yutian, who had been insufferably arrogant in the Two-World Mountain, was powerless before him. The humiliation and grievance he had suppressed all this time seemed to have been vented. Not far away, Saint Sun Wu Hua looked at this scene indifferently. He had no intention of interfering. In his eyes, Yang Yutian's fate had nothing to do with him. Even when Yang Yutian mentioned his master, the Point Cloud Venerable, he showed no intentions of helping. The reason why he had not left was because he wanted to personally witness how long the expert who had defeated him in a single strike could last against the combined attacks of 5 primordial realm experts. Or in other words, he wanted to see how Yang Yutian would die. Sai, a prodigy of a generation, is about to die. Master is right. In the vast saints' world, there has never been a lack of monstrous geniuses with heaven-defying talent. However, 99% of these people will die prematurely. Those who can truly mature and become experts are less than 1 in 100. Saint Child Wu Hua had already changed into a new set of white robes. He stood in the air with his arms crossed as he sighed emotionally. Powerful ripples of energy constantly wreaked havoc on the battlefield as booms constantly rang out. The 5 of them continued to attack Jian Chen wildly, and the frequency of their attacks increased. This was because the 5 of them had discovered something strange. Yang Yutian had already become heavily injured from their attacks, becoming covered in blood. His presence of life had become extremely weak, as if he was on the brink of death. However, he just refused to die. Every time they thought Yang Yutian could not last any longer and could easily kill him with a single strike, the 5 of them would attack Yang Yutian again and again. Apart from making him cough up a few mouthfuls of blood and becoming even more heavily injured, he just refused to die. If it was just once, then so be it. But it happened several times in a row. This made the 5 of them rather frustrated. Chapter 2866. God damn it, just how tough is his life? How is he still alive? Chu Jia finally could not help but curse. Yan Yutian's injuries were so severe that just a single glance was enough to make his scalp tingle. Who knew how many times regular cultivators would have died from such injuries already? But Yan Yutian was still alive. God damn it, he's already so injured. I refuse to believe that we can't kill him today. Attack his soul with your full strength. Zhou Ji gritted his teeth. Zhou Ji also made a sound of gnashing his teeth. His eyes were a little red, and he looked like he was about to go crazy. Yan Yutian's flesh is very, very tough. His head is the toughest part of his body. I've struck his head 3 times with my strength as a primordial realm expert, but I still haven't managed to blow up his head. Even if we can't blow up his head, we have to disperse his soul. Everyone, attack his head with secret techniques. Immediately, Chu Jie and the others all gritted their teeth and began to use powerful secret techniques. This secret technique was personally created by the ancestors of their clans. It was a powerful secret technique that specifically targeted their formations. It could make their attacks even more powerful. They had only used this secret technique twice in the Dark Star world. The first time was during the battle to take back the 100 Saint City. They had used it against the vice leader of the 7th Hall, Defu. They had forcefully injured Defu, who was a first Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime, but possessed the battle prowess of a second Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime. The second time was when Jia Di, the 7th Hall Master, personally came to the 100 Saint City. They had used this secret skill to resist Jia Di's attack. Although it could not withstand a single blow from Jia Di, the power of the secret skill was their greatest trump card and the ultimate technique that they were proud of. However, using the secret technique would take an extremely great toll on both them and the Divine King's sacrificial warriors. As a result, they would not use it so easily unless it was absolutely necessary. Immediately, a terrifying pressure on par with peak first Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes permeated the surroundings. A blurry figure appeared in their formation, radiating with a chilling pressure. The blurry figure was the ancestor of their clan. They had condensed the figure of a Grand Prime through a secret technique. Even though it was only at the level of a first Heavenly Layer Infinite Prime, it possessed an indescribable presence of ways. Of course, not everyone's secret technique was the same. There were also people who had an illusory sword appear out of thin air within their array formation, emitting a monstrous light. This sword was the clan guarding divine artifact of their clan. It was a superior divine artifact and was held by the strongest patriarch of the clan. There were also people in the array formation. The terrifying energy condensed into a pitch-black finger that emitted a terrifying black light. In short, the secret techniques of the 5 organizations all took different forms. However, they were all at the level of peak first Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes, or even close to the level of second Heavenly Layer Infinite Primes. In the next moment, their secret techniques all struck towards Genshin with terrifying might that would make any Divine King's expression change. This time, all 5 of them attacked Genshin's head. Boom! With a boom, Genshin was blown far away. Powerful ripples of energy wreaked havoc, reducing the ground below to a mess. Huge cracks appeared one after another. Chu Jie and the other 4 were slightly out of breath as they stared at Genshin's head. They wanted to see if the strongest attack from the 5 of them had managed to shatter Genshin's head. However, their hearts sank slightly very soon, as they discovered that apart from being covered in blood, Genshin's head was still intact. It had not shattered like they had expected. Even if his head didn't shatter from such a powerful attack, his soul must have been forcefully dispersed, said Gong Rui's as he stared at Jianchen. This time, Jianchen's body was sent flying several dozen kilometers before landing on the ground. He laid there without moving. However, under the nervous and uneasy gazes of Chu Jie and the others, this scene only lasted for less than 3 breaths of time before Jianchen, who was lying on the ground, struggled to stand up. His face was covered in blood, making him look terrifying. It was already impossible to see his face clearly. He's still not dead. Why isn't he dead? Ah, Chu Jie, Zhou Ji, Gong Rui's Kong Feiying, and Zhao Wenbin all looked like they had seen a ghost. Their eyes all widened as disbelief filled their faces. Nearby, the saint child Wu Hua, who had always been watching the battle, blinked his eyes hard as well. He was also in disbelief. Ha 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 ha. I obtained the legacy of a primordial realm expert, so I have various life-saving methods. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for me to make it out of Two World Mountain. Your current strength isn't enough to kill me. Jianchen laughed aloud as he bathed in blood. His presence was extremely weak, and his flames of life tottered as if they could be extinguished at any time. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful and pure vital energy suddenly radiated from his body. Even though only a sliver of the vital energy had appeared, it immediately affected the entire world. Immediately, the wind and clouds churned, and the sky in a range of several 100,000 kilometers became blood red. It was as if the vital energy possessed the supreme ability to change the world. Even a sliver of it was enough to make the world tremble and space shift. As a matter of fact, the vital energy could even interfere with the ways of the world to a certain extent. It was as if the vital energy itself was a manifestation of the ways of the world. The expressions of Chu Jie and the other 4 rapidly changed. From the power of qi and blood, they could feel a supreme might. Mixed within it, there was also an extremely ancient and boundless feeling of vicissitudes of time. This feeling seemed to contain a mysterious and unfathomable power. It caused an extremely intense cleansing of their souls, causing them to develop an urge to kneel and submit from the depths of their hearts as well as shock. What is this? What kind of inheritance is this? Why do I feel that the feeling of submitting to this qi and blood force is even stronger than when I'm facing my own ancestor? This aura seems to be somewhat similar to Jin Hong's. Immediately, Chu Jie and the other 4 were all shocked. They all stared at Jianchen with their eyes wide open. Their faces were filled with extreme shock, disbelief, bewilderment, and ecstasy. These expressions quickly switched between their faces, causing the 5 of them to have extremely interesting expressions right now. This was because the same thought had appeared in their heads at the same time. It was also this thought that caused their hearts to churn. They had always known that Yang Yutian had obtained the legacy of a primordial realm expert. In the beginning, it was only a regular primordial realm expert, so they did not pay much attention to it. However, the vital energy he gave off was extremely similar to the presence Jin Hong had given off when he used the Grand Exalt's secret technique in Two World Mountain. As a result, they immediately began to imagine, reaching a terrifying conclusion that they did not dare to believe. A Grand Exalt's legacy. Has Yang Yutian obtained a Grand Exalt's legacy? The hearts of Chu Jie, Zhou Ji, and the others began to beat faster as their blood surged. No wonder Yang Yutian had lasted so long under their attacks. As it turned out, he had actually obtained a Grand Exalt's legacy. Now, there was no need to say anything more. The 5 of them knew what to do. At that moment, the 5 of them had completely forgotten about their grievances towards Yang Yutian. Their eyes were filled with great joy and greed as they charged towards Jianchen madly. Stop! Chapter 2867. Jin Hong finally made it over. He used a secret technique and moved as fast as he could, crossing a huge distance in a flash. He quickly flew towards Jianqin. Before he had even arrived, he had expanded the senses of his soul, allowing him to see the situation clearly. He saw the primordial realm formation that Chu Jie and the others had created, giving off surging pulses of energy. He also saw Jianqin bathed in blood, heavily injured by the 5 of them. His vitality was so weak that it seemed like it could be extinguished at any time. Jin Hong was enraged by what had happened to Jianqin. He could no longer maintain his calm demeanor. His heart was burning with rage, and his eyes were filled with cold, killing intent. At the same time, the power of his bloodline was drawn in by the essence blood of the ancient skywolf, causing it to surge. The extreme desire from it had reached a peak. The intense desire and attraction seemed to form a magical force that impacted Jin Hong's mind in waves, making him drool with desire. However, Jin Hong couldn't care less about the strange movements of his bloodline power. His will was as firm as iron, and he forcefully suppressed the impact and influence of his bloodline power on his will. His eyes emitted a monstrous fury, and he quickly approached with an intense killing intent. This was because he was still several million kilometers away from Jianqin. Even with his current speed, it would take him some time to cross that distance. Perhaps it would not take too long, but he could tell that Jianqin was already in danger. He could not last much longer. In such a situation, even if it was just a few seconds, far too many irreversible things would happen. Oh no, Jin Hong has actually come. How did he get here so quickly? Quick, do it. We have to kill Yang Yuqian before Jin Hong gets here, or all our preparations today will be for nothing. The expressions of Chu Jie and the other 4 changed, and they immediately became anxious, because they knew that once Jin Hong arrived here, it would be impossible for them to kill Yang Yuqian, not to mention trying to seize the good fortune from Yang Yuqian. They did not dare to underestimate Jin Hong. After all, he was the successor of a grand exalt. Just this identity alone made them feel extremely fearful. Chu Jie and the other 4 immediately cast the powerful secret technique again, regardless of the cost and consumption. Immediately, the illusionary figure of the Grand Prime and the body of energy of the high-quality god artifact appeared again, pulsing with shocking pulses. How dare you! Jin Hong's roar resounded through the heavens and earth. He was so angry that he immediately changed his hand seals and pointed at the void in front of him. This finger seemed to contain a supreme, mysterious force. As soon as it was pointed out, the laws of space before him immediately fell into chaos. It was as if it had been disturbed by an invisible force, causing space to become extremely chaotic. On the other hand, Jin Hong directly charged into the chaotic space. He vanished in an instant, and when he reappeared, he was already several million kilometers away as if he had teleported. In that instance, he crossed a huge distance. The distance between him and Jianqin had shrunk to 1,000 kilometers. Afterwards, the energy on him surged like a tsunami. A tremendous pressure permeated the surroundings, and the illusionary figure of the ancient sky wolf silently appeared behind him. Afterwards, energy surged around him as he howled at the sky. Immediately, a wolf's howl that seemed to echo through the entire dark star world rang out. With the sound, the ground immediately shook, and yin and yang in the surroundings changed. Everything seemed to yield, and the entire world shook. Just when the 5 of them were about to use their secret techniques, the wolf's howl rang out. The sound could pierce through metal and rock, ignoring all defenses. It directly passed through the protective energy of their primordial realm formations and struck their heads like lightning. The voice possessed an indescribably terrifying deterrence. As soon as the voice reached their ears, it directly affected their souls, causing their consciousnesses to stagnate at that moment. They became completely stiff, frozen in their fixed movements. This was an extremely strange sight. It was as if Jin Hong's howl had caused space to freeze and time to come to a standstill. As a result, The 5 of them and the thousands of divine kings, sacrificial warriors, all short-circuited their minds, becoming stupefied. In the next moment, a string of heavy explosions rang out from the primordial realm formation. The formation that connected their powers suddenly collapsed by itself. In just a few seconds, the primordial realm formation that Chu Jie and the others relied on the most collapsed just like that. Even the powerful secret techniques they had condensed seemed to lose their restraints as the formation collapsed, dispersing into the surroundings as tremendous energy. This scene left Saint Wu Hua dumbfounded as he watched from afar. His face was filled with shock. He knew extremely well just how powerful the primordial realm formation was. However, such a powerful formation had actually collapsed from a single roar from Jin Hong, as if it was so fragile. This is the Grand Sovereign's secret technique. Saint Child Wu Hua gulped. At this moment, his fear of Jin Hong had already reached the depths of his bones. His gaze once again turned towards Jianqin. Although he had not come into contact with Jianqin, unlike Chu Jie and the rest, he was not able to roughly discern the origin of the qi and blood on Jianqin's body. However, just by the astonishing might that the qi and blood possessed, he knew that it was an extremely rare item. Therefore, a sliver of desire appeared in his eyes. But in the end, he didn't dare to act rashly, because whether it was his own strength or the strength of the sect behind him, it was not enough to support him to act unscrupulously in 100 Saint City. At this moment, Chu Jie and the others all recovered as well. They looked at the collapsed primordial realm formation and Jin Hong, who had already appeared 1,000 kilometers away. Their faces all changed drastically. While they were shocked by how easily Jin Hong got through the formation, they also felt extremely unwilling to accept this outcome. They were not afraid of Jin Hong, because they knew that even if they could not defeat Jin Hong would not really kill them. They represented the families behind them. Although their positions in their families were far from Jin Hong's position in the Wolf Clan, they still shouldered the dignity of their families to a certain extent. However, what they were unwilling to accept was that the Grand Exalt's legacy that might have existed on Yang Yutian's body slipped past them just like that. They watched helplessly as they missed out on a great opportunity that might have been able to change their fates. This huge difference caused a strong sense of unwillingness and hatred to form in the hearts of the 5 of them. This hatred was naturally directed at Jin Hong. Ha 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 ha, without your primordial realm formations, what are you going to use to kill me? Looks like the one who's going to die today isn't me, but you. At this moment, Jianqin laughed aloud with a mouth full of blood. The vital energy on him condensed from the essence, blood of the ancient skywolf, seemed to condense into 5-meter-long arrows in a single moment. Afterwards, it shot towards the 5 of them as streaks of red light. Of course, the arrows formed from the vital energy of the ancient skywolf were only a disguise. Jianqin was still unable to use the power of the essence, blood of the ancient skywolf as he wished, let alone use it to injure people. The true killing intent of this attack was the weak strand of sword qi hidden within the vital energy. Even though the sword qi was weak, its might was enough to shake up the world in the Dark Star world. This was because it was a terrifying strand of sword qi that could kill primordial realm experts. At this moment, Jianqin finally found a suitable opportunity to launch a counterattack under the cover of the vital energy. Chapter 2868. At that moment, the 5 vital arrows shone with red light, enveloping the 5 of them. The expressions of Chu Jie, Zhou Ji, Kong Feiying, Zhao Wenbin, and Gong Rui changed drastically. They had already experienced the terror of this qi and blood energy. The terrifying might that could cause the heavens and earth to change color had already frightened them to the point that their souls almost left their bodies. Most importantly, they had already guessed that the vital energy was probably connected to a Grand Exalt's legacy. As a matter of fact, it might even be a power that belonged to Grand Exalts. Even with their primordial realm formations, they were powerless against such a great power. let alone now that the primordial realm formation had been destroyed. Their strength had been reduced to its original state, so they were even more powerless against the power that had already reached the level of grand exalts in their eyes. This was only because they were not powerful enough. Otherwise, if a powerful primordial realm expert was present, they probably would have been able to tell with a single glance that Jianshin's 5 vital arrows were just a bluff. Yang Yutian, I am a core disciple of the Jade sect. My status is noble in the Jade sect. If you kill me, the Jade sect will not let you go. When he was shrouded by the terrifying power of qi and blood, the strong sense of death finally made Zhou Zi's will collapse. He shouted with a frightened face, and the intention to beg for mercy was obvious. Yang Yutian, from today onwards, I, Gong Rue, have no grievances with you. I won't make any more trouble for you in the future. I just hope you can stop immediately. Under the threat of death, Gong Rue temporarily cast aside his pride. He endured the humiliation and reluctance as he begged for mercy. That was what he said, but the depths of his eyes were still filled with hatred and intense killing intent. Kong Feiying of the Songqiong family and Zhao Wenbin of the Zhao family also transmitted their voices to each other. Their faces were pale with fright, because they could feel a deathly aura from the 5 streams of powerful qi and blood. It was enough to make their souls tremble. Even though they had brought divine king realm death warriors and supreme quality saint artifacts with them, the presence of death did not give them any sense of security at all. However, Jianshin ignored their pleas. His eyes were cold, and his killing intent was determined. He controlled the tiny strand of sword qi to stab towards the heads of the 5 people mercilessly under the concealment of the vital energy. Without a sound, this tiny strand of sword qi entered the space between their eyebrows. This was a terrifying power that could kill primordial realm experts. Before it, the 5 of them were only at the divine king realm, so they were naturally unable to resist at all. In the blink of an eye, Chu Jie, Kong Feiying, Zhou Zi, Gong Rue, and Zhao Wenbin's primordial spirits were smashed into pieces. Immediately afterwards, strands of vital energy entered their heads through the wounds on their foreheads, leaving behind some of the presence of vital energy. It made it seem like the 5 of them had died to the vital energy. The vital energy in the surroundings gradually dispersed. When the surroundings cleared up again, Chu Jie, Zhou Zi, Kong Feiying, Gong Rue, and Zhao Wenbin had all become corpses on the ground. The divine king, realm death, warriors they had brought with them all stood where they were at a loss. As for Jianshin, he seemed to have used up all the energy in his body. Not only was his presence feeble, but his flames of life tottered as well. He seemed to have run out of energy. Afterwards, he closed his eyes and fainted on the ground. As he fainted, the droplet of essence blood hidden in his body seemed to lose some sort of restraint. The pure vital energy that belonged to the essence blood broke through the restraints on Jianshin's body and directly leaked out, revolving around him. At the same time, the essence blood seemed to possess a mind of its own. It slowly moved through Jianshin's body before arriving at Jianshin's mouth in the end. It seemed to want to break free from Jianshin's control and fly out. However, Jianshin's teeth were firmly shut. His mouth had become a prison, blocking the only exit. The essence blood was trapped inside. At this moment, all of Jianshin's defenses had been lowered to the lowest. If one wanted to take the essence blood from the ancient skywolf, there was no need for great cultivation. All they needed to do was gently pry open Jianshin's mouth, and the essence blood would be easily obtained. Nearby, the Saint Sunwu Hua looked at the unconscious Jianshin and sensed the pure vital energy in Jianshin's mouth. A gleam of light immediately flashed through his eyes. Even though he had yet to recognize that this was the essence blood of a grand exalt, he knew that it was definitely something impressive. Gritting his teeth, he immediately appeared beside Jianshin. Piss off. No matter who you are, if you dare to take what belongs to Yang Yutian, I will hunt you down to the ends of the world. I won't even let your sect go." Just when the Saint Sun Wuhua was about to remove the essence blood from Genshin's mouth, Jin Hong's furious voice boomed out. His body turned into a beam of light, crossing the last 1,000 miles at an extremely fast speed. His aura was monstrous, and it was as if he had turned into a mighty silver wolf running. With an unstoppable force, he headed straight for Saint Sun Wuhua. Moreover, during the collision, layers of ripples appeared in the space under the pressure of the powerful force. It was as if a stone had been thrown into a calm lake, stirring up circles of ripples. Jin Hong's power had interfered with the space there, even though the interference was not very great. Unless one's comprehension of the laws of space surpassed Jin Hong's level of comprehension, they would not be able to use space again. The Saint Sun Wuhua's face changed, and he immediately became extremely stern. He was arrogant, but he knew about Jin Hong's reputation as a Grand Exalt successor. Even in the vast saint's world, the title of Grand Exalt successor was an extremely dazzling existence. Even if his strength was very weak, no one could ignore him. The Saint Sun Wuhua obviously did not dare to be careless when he faced someone like that. Even though he was unable to control space as he wished due to Jin Hong's flames, the power of laws was not affected. He held the laws of space in one hand and the laws of time in the other. With the two laws in his hands, the power he could unleash was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. He struck out at Jin Hong as hard as he could. Boom! With a loud boom, Saint Sun Wuhua was viciously slammed into by Jin Hong, who had transformed into a silver wolf. Not only did his attack not cause any damage to the silver wolf, but he himself was sent flying far away, spitting out blood. All the ribs in his chest were broken, and his entire chest caved in. The terrible force of the collision had shattered all his internal organs. Saint Sun Wuhua spat out several mouthfuls of blood. He took a deep look at Jin Hong with fear on his face, then turned and fled without looking back. After leaving the area of space disturbed by Jin Hong, the power of space immediately fluctuated, and his figure disappeared in an instant. Jin Hong did not chase after him. He did not even look at the Saint Sun Wuhua. He stared at the unconscious Genshin on the ground without blinking. His eyes were filled with undisguised shock and disbelief. He was the successor of the ancient Skywolf, the person closest to the ancient Skywolf in the world right now. He could even be described as the person closest to the ancient Skywolf. As a result, he recognized the origin of Jian Chen's vital energy with a single glance. This shocked him. It made him extremely shocked. The storm in his heart did not subside for a very long time. At this moment, he even doubted if there was something wrong with his senses. He wondered if his eyes were playing tricks on him. He even wondered if he had fallen into a dream. This was because he had sensed a drop of the ancient Skywolf's essence, blood on Yang Yutian's body. This was essence blood. It was different from ordinary blood. It was far, far more precious than ordinary blood. The two could not be compared at all. Although he had sensed something from Yang Yutian's body that his bloodline power desired more than once, Jin Hong had imagined all sorts of possibilities and reached many conclusions. However, he never would have thought that the thing on Yang Yutian's body that could trigger his bloodline power would be a drop of the ancient Skywolf's essence blood. Chapter 2869. Jin Hong struggled to remain calm as he faced the droplet of essence blood placed before him. His heart began to burn as his blood flowed at an unprecedented rate. The power of his bloodline surged as if it was about to combust. This was because the droplet of essence blood on Genshin came from the same source as him. They came from the same master, so the effects of the essence blood would naturally be extremely limited in the hands of anyone else. But it was completely different to Jin Hong. Not only could he completely absorb and use all the energy within the essence blood, but he could also strengthen the power of his bloodline through the essence blood. He could even make his bloodline evolve and reach a new level. Jin Hong stared at the unconscious Jianchen, with mixed feelings. Naturally, he knew that it would be extremely easy for him to take the essence blood from Jianchen right now, but he did not do so. Even though the depths of his heart burned with passion, his eyes remained clear the entire time. He did not show any greed at all. Afterwards, he extended a finger towards Jianchen's throat, and pure energy surged out, drawing the essence blood back into Jianchen's body. It had already reached Jianchen's mouth and wanted to escape. Afterwards, he took out a jade bottle from his space ring. Just when he was about to open the bottle, a dense presence of life immediately radiated out. This life aura was vast, majestic, and extremely pure. In terms of rank, it far surpassed the real thing, and had completely stepped into the ranks of the god rank. Just its life aura alone made the wasteland within a radius of a kilometer into an oasis full of vitality in an instant. Clearly, it was impossible for this item to have been brought in from the outside world. Instead, it was a rare item from the Dark Star world. Jin Hong poured out some green liquid that was filled with life energy onto Jianchen. As soon as the liquid came in contact with Jianchen's skin, it silently fused with him and was absorbed by his body. In the next moment, Jianchen's ghastly wounds immediately healed at a visible rate. New flesh grew out of his missing flesh as well. The green liquid that contained a tremendous amount of life force clearly possessed an unbelievable effect when it came to healing. In just a few seconds, Jianchen had made a full recovery. Of course, this was only the wounds on his body. Clearly, his heavily injured origin and soul had not been completely healed. As a result, even though his wounds had healed, Jianchen's face was pale. It was also at this moment that Jianchen slowly opened his eyes. He was still in a weak state. His expression was dispirited and his eyes were dim. He looked at Jin Hong, who was squatting beside him, and opened his mouth. Just as he was about to speak, Jin Hong raised his hand to stop him. Jin Hong said with a serious expression, "Don't speak first. I'll bring you back to the 100 Saints City immediately. Everything can wait until we return to the 100 Saints City." After saying that, Jin Hong prepared to bring Jianchen back to the 100 Saints City. "There's no need to return to the 100 Saints City. My injuries are no longer a problem. I only need to find a safe place to recuperate for a while, and I'll be able to recover." Jianchen struggled to his feet. He glanced at the several thousand Divine King level men of sacrifice that Chu Jie and the others had brought. He did not kill them all. Afterward, he staggered into the air and flew off into the distance. At the same time, he said, "Jin Hong, I know you have questions. Let's find a place to slowly talk about it." In the outskirts of the Two-World mountain range, Jianchen sat with his legs crossed on the peak of a mountain shrouded in dense mist. He was enveloped by a layer of dense vital energy, causing him to be bathed in blood-red light. He seemed like a huge, blood-red cocoon. Jin Hong sat beside him. He looked at the layer of blood-red light around Jianchen with mixed feelings in his eyes. There was also deep doubt and great curiosity. Naturally, he was curious about the origins of the ancient Skywolf's essence blood. Jin Hong was not worried about Jianchen's injuries. First, he had the springs of life, and now he had the power of a Grand Exalt's essence blood. He believed that Jianchen would make a full recovery very quickly under the healing of these two powers. However, what Jin Hong did not know was that the essence blood did not have the miraculous effects on Jianchen's injuries that he had imagined. Jianchen purposefully released the power of the essence blood as a disguise, making everything he did seem reasonable. Moreover, there was something else that Jin Hong had failed to notice at all. It was that an invisible force had enveloped the entire region of 100,000 kilometers, isolating all presence. As a result, any presence that leaked out would not reach the imperial capital of the Darkstar clan. This was Jianchen's supreme will. In reality, when he used the power of the ancient Skywolf's essence blood, he had already enveloped the entire region with his supreme will. All his injuries, the abnormal behavior of his essence blood, and even his unconscious state were all faked by Jianchen. His goal was to create the illusion that he was in a weakened state. He showed this to Jin Hong and clearly exposed the existence of the Grand Exalt's essence blood because he wanted to see Jin Hong's reaction. He wanted to see whether Jin Hong would try to steal it or not. In the end, Jin Hong's reaction did not disappoint Jianchen. As a result, Jianchen began to truly accept Jin Hong. You must be very curious about where the essence blood in my body comes from, right? At this moment, Jianchen spoke as he healed. He was enveloped by the red cocoon formed from vital energy, so it was impossible to see him clearly. Jin Hong could not help but turn his head when he heard that. He looked at Jianchen, who was enveloped by vital energy, and after a moment of thought, he said, "So you know where the droplet of blood in your body came from?" "I do. Not only do I know its origins, but I also know where you obtain the Grand Exalt's legacy. This is because the ancient Skywolf's legacy was discovered by a friend of mine who has already passed away by accident," Jianchen said indifferently. "What?" Jin Hong was shocked. He suddenly stood up. At this moment, the shock that Jianchen's words brought to him was far greater than the fact that he had discovered the essence, blood in his body. Their Skywolf clan had always viewed discovering the ancient Skywolf's legacy as the greatest glory of the entire clan. They believed that it was the will of the heavens, the will of the heavens. However, he had never thought that all of this would be related to Yang Yutian. The reason why he was able to obtain the Grand Exalt's legacy was all because of Yang Yutian, who sat beside him. Instead, he had become the greatest contributor. For a moment, Jin Hong's expression changed. His feelings were extremely mixed. If the situation really was as Yang Yutian had said, did he not owe Yang Yutian a great favor? Moreover, this favor was so great that he would probably never be able to repay it in his entire life. After all, if Yang Yutian had not opened the Grand Exalt's legacy, it would have been impossible for him to obtain the legacy. Without the legacy, Jin Hong would probably still be an insignificant figure in the clan. How would he have been able to enjoy such glory? Without any exaggeration, this was the grace of rebirth. Jin Hong sucked in a few deep breaths before slowly taking a few steps back. He bowed towards Jianchen and thanked him sincerely. "Brother Jin Hong, there's no need for that. It's your fortune to be chosen as the successor of the ancient Skywolf. I'm just a little curious. Have you never thought about taking away the droplet of essence blood in my body? I'm already heavily injured right now. With your strength, it'll be extremely easy for you to take the essence blood from me. Are you not tempted by it at all?" Chapter 2870. Jin Hong sucked in a deep breath and said, "Brother Yang Yutian, you're right. The droplet of Grand Exalt's essence blood on you is extremely attractive to me. At the same time, because it comes from the same source as my legacy, the assistance it can provide me might far exceed my expectations. It might even be able to change my fate once again. It's just that you don't understand me. You don't understand my character because I'm not a greedy person, nor am I a robber who only knows how to rob. In my principles, I've never thought of seizing the good fortune of others. Every person has their own fortune and destiny. Since you've obtained the essence blood, it's your own fortune and destiny. By the same logic, Senior Skywolf's legacy has chosen me and not anyone else. So it's my fortune and destiny. If everyone is as greedy as you imagine them to be, wanting to rob whatever they see, the Grand Exalt's legacy probably wouldn't have remained in my hands. It would have been taken away by the experts of my race long ago." Jin Hong's words were full of conviction and justice. They came from the bottom of his heart. As he spoke, a righteous aura radiated from him. Jianchen glanced at Jin Hong deeply. Naturally, he could sense Jin Hong's sense of righteousness. In the vast saints' world, there really were not many people who could be as magnanimous as Jin Hong. As long as the benefits were great enough, as long as the temptation was great enough, even a few peak experts who had reached Grand Prime would be willing to take it by force without any regard for their dignity. In the past, when he fled with the Inata Tower, this had happened many times. Moreover, when Poseidon Song accepted Xiaoman as his master, a group of Grand Primes had also been lured over. Jin Hong, let me ask you this. Do you really not want the essence blood on me? Jianqin asked calmly. Of course I want it. Why wouldn't I want it? If the Grand Exalt's essence blood was without an owner, I would definitely try to take it. It'll be up to strength to decide who gets it in the end. It's just that this droplet of essence blood already belongs to you. Moreover, it's all thanks to you that I was able to obtain the Grand Exalt's legacy. As a result, I definitely won't covet the droplet of essence blood on you at all, or I would be a heartless and unjust person, said Jin Hong. I didn't misjudge you. The glow around Jianqin gradually dispersed, revealing him. However, his wounds had already recovered. Apart from being slightly sluggish, he seemed to have made a full recovery. Afterwards, the essence blood of the ancient skywolf slowly drifted out of Jianqin's body. Immediately, a dense vital energy permeated the surroundings, dyeing the surrounding space red. Jin Hong, this drop of essence blood of the ancient skywolf is actually more useful to you. Leaving it with me will only cause it to collect dust. Now, I'll give this drop of essence blood to you so that it can return to the person it belongs to. Jianqin controlled the droplet of essence blood to slowly float before Jin Hong. The droplet of essence blood was not large, but the terrifying vital energy and energy within it could be described as earth-shaking. This was because its level was just too great. It had reached a level where no one could catch up to it. Jin Hong's expression immediately changed. Brother Yang Yutian, you can't do that. If you don't have this droplet of essence blood, it'll definitely affect your strength greatly. Jin Hong had already attributed Jianqin's battle prowess that far exceeded people of the same level as him, as well as his tenacious vitality and terrifying rate of recovery, to the droplet of essence blood. Brother Jin Hong, this droplet of essence blood isn't as useful to me as you imagine it to be, but to you it can even change your fate once. Moreover, I'm not giving it to you completely. I need to use it to exchange for something. Jianqin was indifferent, as if the droplet of Grand Exalt's essence blood was not particularly important to him. He was not affected at all. Jin Hong sucked in a deep breath. What do you want to exchange it for? I want the recipe for the 100 Calamity Divine King Pill. The elders of my clan paid a certain price to exchange for the recipe for the 100 Calamity Divine King Pill. But its value is nowhere near as important as this droplet of essence blood, said Jin Hong. Brother Jin Hong, are you exchanging it or not? If you're not exchanging it, I can use this droplet of essence blood to exchange with the Tianhe clan. I believe the Tianhe clan will be extremely willing. Jianqin looked at Jin Hong with a smile. Yes. Jin Hong gritted his teeth before bowing deeply towards Jianqin again. He said gratefully, Brother Yang Yutian, I can't thank you enough. If you need my help in the future, I will definitely assist you with everything I have. Afterwards, Jin Hong did not stand on ceremony. He accepted the droplet of essence blood, but he was in no hurry to refine it. Instead, he took out his communication treasure and contacted the 100 Saint City as soon as possible. He sent people to the ruins of the spirit's world to ask for the recipe for the Divine King Pill. A Grand Prime of the Ashwolf clan was present at the entrance of the Dark Star world. Jin Hong's request was directly delivered to the ancestor. Jin Hong actually needs the recipe for the 100 Calamity Divine King Pill? Strange. What does he want it for? The Dark Star clansmen trapped in the world of the fallen beast don't seem to need the recipe for the Divine King Pill, right? The ancestor of the Ashwolf clan was filled with doubt when he received the news. In the past, our clan had an agreement with the person who created the recipe. The recipe can only be used by our clan, and it cannot be passed on to others. Not only does the agreement restrict our Ashwolf clan, but it also includes all the peak organizations that obtain the recipe from that person. As a result, if Jin Hong uses the recipe himself, our Ashwolf clan won't be breaking the agreement. However, if Jin Hong gives it to someone else, our Ashwolf clan will be breaking the agreement. We'll have to pay quite a lot of resources. Whatever. Jin Hong is our clan's Qilin. Our clan still hopes that he can lead our clan to glory in the future. We should do our best to satisfy all of his requests. Jianqin and Jin Hong waited for 2 days on the same mountain peak in the outskirts of the Two-World Mountain in the Dark Star World. Finally, a divine king sacrificial warrior of the Ashwolf clan arrived with the recipe. Jin Hong passed the recipe to Jianqin solemnly and said, Yang Yutian, the ancestor, has warned that a single pill recipe can only be used by a single clan or organization. Once it spreads, we'll have to pay quite a price. That's because our clan paid a certain price for the recipe. We came to an agreement when we exchanged it. Once we break the agreement and it spreads to people who don't belong to our clan, we'll have to pay quite a price to breach the agreement. Of course, the consequences of breaking the agreement with the pill recipe in my hands will be borne by our clan. However, once the pill recipe is in your hands, if you have an organization, you can only limit the use of it to your organization. You can't pass it on to another organization, or no ordinary person will be able to bear the consequences of breaking the agreement. Chapter 2871. Jianqin glanced through the pill recipe roughly. The detailed method and steps for refining the 100 Tribulations Divine King's pill were recorded clearly. Even all the required ingredients were recorded. The Divine King grass was only an essential main ingredient. In reality, refining the 100 Tribulations Divine King's pill required several dozen other supplementary ingredients apart from Divine King grass. These supplementary ingredients were not particularly rare. They could be purchased in large quantities in the Saints' world. Once I return to the Tianyuan family, I'll need to prepare the pill. Right now, Senior Su Ran, who's already a chaotic prime, is watching over the higher-ups in the Tianyuan family. We've also hired a few infinite primes, but these primordial realm experts basically serve as the foundation of the clan. We rarely use them. Only the central forces of the Divine King are used frequently. Right now, basically 90% of the Divine King in the Tianyuan family are hired. There are pitifully few Divine Kings who truly belong to the clan. With the appearance of the high-quality Divine King's pill, we just happen to be able to fill up some of the central forces of the Tianyuan family. Jianqin thought to himself. He had the recipe for the Divine King's pill, as well as the ingredients. Everything was ready. He only lacked one thing. At that moment, he even felt an urge to immediately return to the Tianyuan family to refine the pill. Brother Yang Yutian, I plan on leaving the Dark Star World after returning to the 100 Saints City this time. I need to absorb this droplet of essence, blood, under the protection of the ancestor. If nothing goes wrong, my strength will definitely skyrocket once I absorb it. I might even have a sliver of hope of directly reaching the primordial realm, said Jin Hong. His voice was filled with undisguised excitement. He was still extremely young right now, nowhere near 1,000 years old. If he really did reach the primordial realm within 1,000 years, it would definitely be a legendary story that would go down in history. There were countless geniuses in the vast Saints world. As a matter of fact, there was no lack of people with unprecedented talent. However, there were only a handful of people who could reach the primordial realm within 1,000 years. Then I'll congratulate Brother Jin Hong first. I hope you can reach the primordial realm soon. Jianqin clasped his hands and said. However, right after he finished saying those words, his heart suddenly trembled. At this moment, his perception that far surpassed those of the same cultivation level as him had sensed an extremely powerful aura flash past in the distance. Its speed was extremely fast, and it directly charged into the Two-World Mountain from the territory of the Dark Star Realm. It was as if the ruler of the world had arrived. It did not conceal itself in the slightest and disappeared into the depths of the Two-World Mountain in an instant. Dark Star Emperor. Jianqin shivered inside. The presence was so powerful that it had even surpassed the ninth heavenly layer of infinite primes. It was completely equivalent to a chaotic prime. There was only a single person like that in the entire Dark Star realm. Jianqin immediately became stern. The Dark Star Emperor had actually emerged from seclusion, and he had personally entered the depths of the Two-World Mountain. He immediately became vigilant. Brother Jin Hong, I've wasted enough time here. I need to set off to hunt the life-devouring beast, so let's part ways here. Oh, right, once you return to the 100 Saint City, please pass on a message for me. The Dark Star realm hasn't been peaceful recently. Something huge will happen soon, so it's best if she leaves. With that, Jianqin left. He disappeared into the mist very soon. Jin Hong opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but Jianqin had already vanished. Jianqin's final words filled him with doubt. He was rather confused. The Dark Star realm hasn't been peaceful recently? Something huge was about to happen? If something huge really was about to happen, their 100 Saints city should have received the news first. How was it possible for Yang Yutian, who was an independent cultivator and did not have his own information network in the Dark Star realm, to learn about something that even they did not know about before them? However, looking at Yang Yutian's stern expression, he did not seem like he was joking. For a moment, Jin Hong became rather uncertain. Did Yang Yutian really know some secrets? It looks like this Yang Yutian isn't as simple as he seems on the surface, Jin Hong murmured. At that moment, Jianqin's figure had become rather unfathomable in his heart. Within the Two-World Mountain, Jianqin concealed his presence and flew through the forest silently like a ghost. He had already expanded the senses of his soul. He purposefully concealed it, carefully expanding it into the surroundings in an extremely secretive manner. It was obvious that the Dark Star Emperor had entered the Two-World Mountain for two matters. The first was the droplet of essence Blood the City, Lord of Dark Night City, had left behind, and the second was obviously for his disguise as Kuan-Tian. There was even a slight possibility that it was because of Sun Ran. When Sun Ran died, it caused a very great disturbance in the depths of the Two-World Mountain. It basically alarmed all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts there. The imperial city of the Dark Star clan has probably received news of such a great matter long ago. It's no secret that I've entered the depths of the Two-World Mountain as Kuan-Tian. They must have guessed that I'm in danger. I wonder if they've leaked Sun Ran's whereabouts. If the royal city learns of Sen's whereabouts in Two-World Mountain, then the two Hall Masters of the Dark Star race will be in danger at the same time. This is an earth-shattering matter for the entire race, so it'll naturally alarm the Dark Star Emperor. The Dark Star race can't afford to lose two Hall Masters, Jianqin said with a frown. He knew that with the appearance of the Dark Star Emperor, his trip to the 100 Saint City had to end prematurely. He needed to return to the 5th Divine Hall as Kuan-Tian. Very soon, Jianqin entered the depths of the Two-World Mountain. Along the way, he constantly sensed the imprint he had left behind earlier. He needed to return to the pool where the two god artifacts of Kuan-Tian were hidden before the Dark Star Emperor and take them out. At this moment, the roars of beasts had already filled the depths of the Two-World Mountain. The Dark Star Emperor seemed invincible. His presence erupted as he rampaged through the depths of the Two-World Mountain without any disguise. Naturally, he alarmed all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts in the mountain as soon as possible. At this moment, all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts in the Two-World Mountain were mobilized. They surrounded the Dark Star Emperor from all directions. The Dark Star Emperor was too strong. Even though his strength was suppressed here, he was still fearless. Even when facing all the life-sucking beasts in the Two-World Mountain, he didn't show the slightest bit of fear. He radiated with his presence, making himself a dazzling beacon. Who knew if he was announcing his arrival to the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts in the Two-World Mountain, or if he was pointing out a path for the two Hall Masters. He flew around aimlessly. Every time he flew a certain distance, he would stop and hover in midair to sense his surroundings. Jianqin carefully concealed all of his presence. He secretly sensed the Dark Star Emperor's location from afar. He was stern. He really is an existence comparable to a chaotic prime. He still possesses the battle prowess of a ninth heavenly layer infinite prime in the depths of the two-world mountain. Chapter 2872. At this moment, a few primordial realm life-devouring beasts had already approached the Dark Star Emperor. However, they stopped several dozen kilometers away and looked in his direction. Their eyes that possessed some intelligence were filled with fear, and they did not dare to approach him. The Dark Star Emperor's strength and shocking presence actually intimidated the primordial realm life-devouring beasts. As a matter of fact, the primordial realm life-devouring beasts showed deep fear and dread in their eyes. It was as if they had suffered quite a bit to the Dark Star Emperor's hands in the past. Swish! At this moment, the Dark Star Emperor moved. He was invincible, rampaging through the depths of the two-world mountains fearlessly. He directly flew off in the opposite direction. There just happened to be a primordial realm, life-devouring beast hesitating in the direction he flew towards, as if it was waiting for reinforcements. Now that it saw the Dark Star Emperor fly towards it, it immediately shuddered in fright and dodged to one side in a hurry. However, it was still much slower. Several dozen kilometers was only a single step in the eyes of the Dark Star Emperor. He arrived beside the primordial realm life-devouring beast in a single instance. As if he felt that the primordial realm life-devouring beast's existence was obstructing his path, he waved his hand casually. As he waved his hand, shocking energy immediately surged out. It condensed into a 30-meter-wide hand of energy in the air in a single instance, swinging towards the primordial realm life-devouring beast mercilessly. The Dark Star Emperor's strength had already been suppressed in the depths of the two-world mountains, so he was unable to unleash his full strength. However, even with that being the case, the power of his strike was still extremely shocking. Bang! The third heavenly layer infinite prime, life-devouring beast, could not even dodge the huge hand of energy. It was struck squarely, and with a wail it was blown far away. As it flew back, it smashed through many towering trees before smashing into a mountain heavily, sinking in deeply. The palm strike was extremely terrifying. Not only did it heavily injure a primordial realm, life-devouring beast, but the brutal energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings as well. It directly formed a storm of destruction, reducing all the plants in a range of several dozen kilometers to dust. Just the energy shock waves from this attack were enough to wipe out all life within a radius of several dozen kilometers, razing the entire area to the ground. When the Dark Star Emperor injured the primordial realm life-devouring beast, the other primordial realm life-devouring beasts nearby did not go up to provide assistance. Instead, they all retreated subconsciously as fear filled their eyes. However, the Dark Star Emperor didn't pay any attention to them. Perhaps the Dark Star Emperor didn't care about these life-sucking beasts at all. Even when he attacked the life-sucking beast, it was only because it was blocking the path. Soon after, he took a step in the void and disappeared in a flash. In just a few steps, he appeared tens of thousands of miles away. After that, he stopped again and sensed carefully. This time, he seemed to sense something, and a gleam of light immediately flashed through his eyes. With a flash, he shot through the forest and arrived in the nest of a primordial realm, life-devouring beast in the end. The primordial realm, life-devouring beast that possessed the nest fled as quickly as it could, as if it had seen the plague. It hid 100 kilometers away as it stared at the Dark Star Emperor vigilantly. At the same time, it glanced into the distance from time to time. A sliver of urgency appeared in its eyes. Its more powerful companions were almost here. The Dark Star Emperor reached out, and in the next moment, a space ring flew into his hand as a streak of light. This was the space ring that the city lord of Anya City, Baijin, had lost. A cold light immediately flashed through the Dark Star Emperor's eyes when he saw the space ring. Afterwards, with a crack, the space ring shattered under the pressure of his supreme power. Apart from the droplet of essence blood that remained intact, everything else in the space ring had been reduced to dust. Afterwards, the Dark Star Emperor pointed at the primordial realm, life-devouring beast that belonged to the owner of the nest 100 kilometers away and suddenly clenched his hand. With that, the space 100 kilometers away suddenly showed signs of collapsing. It was as if a supreme force had enveloped the space, causing it to distort violently. The primordial realm, life-devouring beast in that space suddenly felt its body tighten. An extremely great pressure appeared from all directions, crushing down on its body. Its colossal body rapidly shrank under the terrifying pressure. As its body shrank, the dark green blood in its body began to seep out from its pores. Its skin was cracking, its flesh was exploding, and even the sound of bones breaking could be heard. It opened its mouth and let out a painful shriek. Its eyes were wide open. The powerful oppressive force was about to squeeze its eyes out of their sockets. A primordial realm, life-devouring beast that even the hall masters of the Dark Star clan had to treat with caution was actually so fragile before the Dark Star Emperor. Just a casual clench of his hand was enough to crush a primordial realm expert. This was not the laws of space. Instead, it was a pure usage and control of power. The Dark Star Emperor's strength was truly terrifying. His usage and control of power had already reached a level where many primordial realm experts in the Saints' world would tremble in fear. However, at this moment, there was an ear-piercing whistle. A bone arrow pierced through space, passing through countless towering trees and huge mountains as it shot towards the Dark Star Emperor with unbelievable speed. The power within the bone arrow was so great that it was no weaker than the Dark Star Emperor's. A cold light flashed through the Dark Star Emperor's eyes. He suddenly raised his other hand, and powerful energy condensed on his finger. He extended it towards the incoming bone arrow. Bang! The bone arrow turned into a blur and collided with the Dark Star Emperor's finger with unbelievable speed. With a heavy boom, a visible shockwave of energy immediately surged out in all directions, reducing all the vegetation within several hundred kilometers to dust. Huge cracks even appeared in the ground. Chapter 2873. Along the way, the invincible strength the Dark Star Emperor had displayed had made all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts extremely fearful. However, the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts they had come across before were actually not brave enough to take him on. However, at this moment, a bone arrow shot out from the depths of the forest was actually able to contend with the Dark Star Emperor for so long. It was not like the Dark Star Emperor against the other weaker primordial realm, life-devouring beasts, where was easily repelled or injured. This all proved that the primordial realm, life-devouring beast, who had shot out the sword, was extremely close to the Dark Star Emperor in strength, or even on par with him. The great power within the bone arrow was constantly unleashed in the air, forming a dazzling light. It constantly struck the Dark Star Emperor with a terrifying attack that was enough to shock all the Hall Masters of the Dark Star race. Terrifying energy also condensed at the tip of the Dark Star Emperor's finger. The energy was so pure that it could even cause the expressions of any primordial realm expert to change. It had basically condensed into an energy crystal. It shot out from the tip of his finger and resisted the power of the bone arrow, nullifying each other. However, in the end, the bone arrow ran out of energy. Without a backup source of energy, it was not the Dark Star Emperor's opponent. Just when its energy was about to run out, it turned around and vanished into the depths of the forest. But at this moment, in the sky shrouded in thick fog where the Dark Star Emperor was located, the white sky suddenly changed. Suddenly, the sky darkened as a huge shadow rapidly descended from the sky. With a huge pressure, it directly enveloped the Dark Star Great. It was an extremely huge primordial realm, life-devouring beast. The pressure it gave off was so great that it was no weaker than the Dark Star Emperor's. When it fell, an extremely sharp bone arrow had already shot out, directly stabbing towards the Dark Star Emperor. The primordial realm, life-devouring beast that could rival the Dark Star Emperor was clearly the owner of the bone arrow from before. The Dark Star Emperor remained calm. His presence surged as indescribably pure power erupted like a tsunami. He directly threw out a punch. Boom! His punch arrived first, striking the primordial realm, life-devouring beast before the bone arrow could even approach him. With a great boom, the colossal beast immediately came to a halt. Afterwards, it was actually knocked back by the Dark Star Emperor's punch. In the end, with a heavy thud, its powerful body slammed into the ground like a mountain, causing the ground to shake. However, the life-sucking beast landed steadily on the ground, having withstood the powerful attack of the Dark Star Great Emperor. The life-sucking beast, which was strong enough to contend with the Dark Star Great Emperor, did not suffer any injuries. It seemed that its skin was thick enough to withstand the attack of the Dark Star Great Emperor. It was only now that they could vaguely see its body. It was a life-sucking beast that was over 1,000 feet long and looked like an earth dragon. On its back, there were 9 huge bone arrows inserted into it. Its bone arrows clearly had the ability to change their size. The first time it had attacked the Dark Star Emperor from afar, they were only 4 feet long. However, looking at its back now, each bone arrow was over 1,000 feet in length. Roar! Clearly, this was not the first time the Earth Dragon beast had met the Dark Star Emperor. Its eyes were filled with hatred. As soon as it landed, it produced a deep roar and directly charged towards the Dark Star Emperor. Immediately, an intense battle erupted between the Earth Dragon beast and the Dark Star Emperor that was enough to shake up the entire Two-World Mountain. Booms rang out as if the sky was about to collapse. The Earth Dragon beast was also a 9th heavenly layer infinite prime, the same level of cultivation as the Dark Star Emperor. However, it was clearly weaker than the Dark Star Emperor in battle. The Dark Star Emperor was just too powerful. He was already suppressed by a grand exalts while in the Two-World Mountain, so he was unable to unleash his full strength. Under such circumstances, he still possessed a slight advantage against the strongest primordial realm, life-devouring beast in the Two-World Mountain. Although he possessed an advantage, it was still difficult for the Dark Star Emperor to defeat the Earth Dragon beast. This was because the Earth Dragon beast's defenses were just too great. When the Dark Star Emperor's attacks landed on the Earth Dragon beast, they were unable to inflict any heavy injuries. Even if they left behind some small wounds, they would recover in the blink of an eye under the terrifying life force within the Earth Dragon beast. Moreover, the Earth Dragon beast's power would be replenished at all times in the Two-World Mountain. As long as it was here, its power would constantly recover. It was truly inexhaustible. As the earthly dragon beast fought the Dark Star Emperor, the primordial realm life-devouring beasts that had surrounded them all arrived one after another as well. They all joined the battle, attacking the Dark Star Emperor together with the strongest earthly dragon beast. The Dark Star Emperor faced the encirclement of several dozen primordial realm life-devouring beasts. Jianqin observed the Dark Star Emperor's every action closely from the other side of the Two-World Mountain. The Dark Star Emperor did not hide his presence at all, and the disturbance from his battle with the life-devouring beasts was just too great. With Jianqin's strength as a primordial realm expert, he could sense everything clearly even without paying special attention. However, when he discovered that the Dark Star Emperor could fend off all the primordial realm life-devouring beasts in the Two-World Mountain all by himself, he was slightly shocked. If the Dark Star Emperor had displayed such strength in the territory of the Dark Star race, he would not have been surprised at all. After all, the Dark Star Emperor was no weaker than a chaotic prime. It would be extremely normal for him to slay all the life-devouring beasts by himself. However, this was the Two-World Mountain. Even when his strength was suppressed, he was still so powerful. As a result, Jianqin could not help but reevaluate the Dark Star Emperor's strength. At this moment, Jianqin's face changed. He discovered a familiar figure several million kilometers away with the senses of his soul. The vice leader of the Fifth Hall, Dowoojin, had also arrived in the depths of the Two-World Mountain. However, unlike the Dark Star Emperor, Dowoojin concealed all of his presence and carefully searched around the depths of the mountain. He would use secret techniques from time to time as if he was sensing something. He did not alarm any of the life-devouring beasts. As a matter of fact, when he came across godhood life-devouring beasts, he purposefully avoided them. However, while Jianchen could discover Dowoojin, Dowoojin was unable to discover Jianchen. This was because even the senses of the souls of cultivators in the outside world would be greatly affected here, let alone the Dark Star race. At the same time, Jianchen's soul was different. Coupled with his purposeful concealment, it was extremely difficult for people with higher cultivation to discover the senses of his soul in the unique environment of the Two-World Mountain. Soon after he discovered Dowoojin, the 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui, appeared 5 million kilometers away from Dowoojin in another direction that Jianchen's senses of his soul covered. It was not just the two of them. Jianchen even saw the vice leader of the 7th Hall, Enlai. The Two-World Mountain was so large that even with Jianchen's senses of his soul, he could not envelop even a tenth of it. However, in such a short amount of time, 3 primordial realm experts from the Dark Star world had actually appeared in the region he covered with the senses of his soul. This immediately made Jianchen shiver inside. A ridiculous thought suddenly crossed his head. Have all the primordial realm experts of the Dark Star race been mobilized? Chapter 2874. As the senses of his soul were endless, he could observe every single action of Enlai, Feng Shui, and Heiyu clearly. The distance between the 3 of them was not particularly large, and they would stop and use a secret technique to sense their surroundings after advancing for a certain period of time. This was proof that they possessed a unique ability to scout out their surroundings. This probing ability could either directly detect the Dark Star clansmen within a certain distance, or it could also detect certain items. However, Jianchen guessed that this probing ability was probably used on a certain item. For example, the vice leader of the 7th Hall, De Fu, was able to find the essence blood of a divine beast through a space ring, like he was looking for a needle in a haystack in the vast Two-World Mountain. When I left the 5th Divine Hall, I left everything that belonged to Kuan Tian in the 5th Divine Hall. I didn't even take Siyu's essence, blood, with me. I only took Kuan Tian's god artifact armor and sword with me. The god artifact armor and sword were repaired. Looks like I was probably right. The Dark Star race should have a way to sense the existence of god artifacts within a certain range. I hope they haven't found the 2 god artifacts I hid in the primordial realm life-devouring beast's nest. But even if they do find them, it'll be nothing. It'll just take me a lot more time to explain myself. It's better to avoid unnecessary trouble, thought Jianchen. Although he had been the 5th Hall leader for a while, it was naturally impossible for him to know all the methods and secret techniques of the Dark Star race in such a short amount of time. However, he had made preparations beforehand and had thought of a way to deal with them long ago. The rest of the journey was peaceful. Under Jianchen's purposeful concealment, even primordial realm experts would struggle to discover him, let alone the divine king realm life-devouring beast. Before long, Jianchen returned to the pool where he had hidden the Kuan Tian god artifact according to the imprint he had left behind. The primordial realm life-devouring beast in the pool had already left when the Dark Star Emperor's presence leaked out. It made its way towards the Dark Star Emperor. At this time, Jianchen had returned to Kuan Tian's appearance. Even his aura had become exactly the same as Kuan Tian's. However, he concealed it so that not a trace of it leaked out. He carefully hid nearby. He used the senses of his soul to spread out cautiously in the most obscure way possible, enveloping a radius of several hundred kilometers. Only after confirming that there were no people from the Dark Star race in the area did he begin to retrieve the 2 god artifacts hidden there. Jianchen extended his hand and grabbed at the empty space in front of him. With this grab, the space in front of him seemed to have turned into a water surface. surging with rings of spatial ripples. A small portion of Genshin's arm disappeared into the space in front of him. This scene didn't last for very long. In just a breath's worth of time, Genshin pulled back his arm, and the two god artifacts he had hidden here appeared in his hands. Afterwards, with a flash of light, the god artifact armor appeared on his body. Now he had become the leader of the fifth hall, Kuin Tian, once again. In the depths of Two World Mountain, several million kilometers away from Genshin, the vice leader of the fifth hall, Doujin, concealed his presence. He avoided all the life-devouring beasts along the way as he carefully searched the area. I hope the leader is fine. The leader has obtained a fragment of the Star Beast's memories. He has come to Two World Mountain in search of fortuitous encounters that can greatly increase his strength. The fact that the Star Beast has taken pity on him means that the leader has encountered great, fortuitous encounters and great fortune. He'll definitely be fine, Doujin prayed inside as he searched carefully with a secret technique. Their fifth hall had been bullied by the seventh hall for so many years. Now that their leader had broken through after so much difficulty, they possessed the power to contend against the seventh hall. As their leader rapidly grew in strength, their fifth hall even had hopes of suppressing the seventh hall. The three vice leaders would be able to hold their heads high as well. As a result, Doujin believed that the fifth hall could not be without a leader. Otherwise, with the many years of conflict between the fifth hall and the seventh hall, the three vice leaders would not have an easy time. Although there wouldn't be a situation where people of the same race would kill each other, the humiliation they would suffer wouldn't be any less. This time, Doujin was not the only primordial realm expert who had entered Two World Mountain. Bingyuan and Taluo were there as well, except they were separated by several million kilometers. They formed a huge net in the depths of Two World Mountain. Each person was responsible for a region as they searched every inch of the mountain. Kuin Tian, where did you go? Come out quickly. The 10th hall leader, Feng Shui, could be described as the most anxious person among them. As time went on, she became more and more anxious. In particular, when she thought about the news of several dozen primordial realm, life-devouring beasts rampaging in the depths of Two World Mountain, she struggled to calm down. Her relationship with Kuin Tian was extraordinary. Her worry for Kuin Tian completely exceeded the three vice leaders of the fifth hall. Jiadi, you actually tricked Kuin Tian into entering the depths of Two World Mountain. If anything happens to Kuin Tian, I, Feng Shui, will never spare you. Even if I can't beat you, I won't let you off. Feng Shui gritted her teeth. Feng Shui said through gritted teeth. She moved through the forest quickly. With her cultivation as a fifth heavenly layer infinite prime, she could cross several hundred kilometers in a single instance, even if she purposefully slowed down to hide herself. It looks like Feng Shui's feelings for Kuin Tian are quite deep. There's even less reason for me to meet her. On the other side, Genshin withdrew the senses of his soul before flying towards Doujin as Kuin Tian. During this time, Genshin constantly observed Doujin's actions with the senses of his soul. He wanted to confirm how Doujin would find him. Very soon, he was only 10,000 kilometers away from Doujin. However, it was also at this moment that Kuin Tian's armor and sword suddenly pulsed. At the same time, Doujin shuddered violently from 10,000 kilometers away. He suddenly looked in Genshin's direction and was overjoyed. Without any hesitation, he immediately flew over as quickly as he could. As expected, they can find the two god artifacts on me. However, looking at the distance, it seems like they'll only sense them when they're within 10,000 kilometers, Genshin thought. 10,000 kilometers only took a few seconds for a primordial realm expert, like Doujin. Very soon, he turned into a blur and appeared before Genshin like a ghost. Leader. Chapter 2875. That's great, that's great. Hall Master, we've finally found you. You don't know this, but we've been worried sick for your safety all this time, especially Hall Master Feng Shui of the 10th Hall. when she found out that Hall Master had entered the depths of Two World Mountain alone. She was so angry that she almost skinned the three of us. Do Wujin arrived before Genshin in a flash. He looked at the armored and energetic Hall Master and finally stopped worrying. "Why have you appeared here?" And the expert fighting the life-devouring beast in the distance, "Is that the emperor of our clan?" Genshin asked, although he had already guessed that most of the primordial realm experts of the Darkstar race had mobilized, and even if not all of them had come, at least half of them would have been mobilized. However, it was impossible for Kuan Tian to discover this with his strength. "I'll have to start from the disturbance in Two World Mountain a few days ago. We received news that several dozen presences of Domain Lord level life devouring beasts had appeared in the depths of Two World Mountain at the same time. In the Darkstar world, only our primordial realm experts could cause all the Domain Lord level life devouring beasts to go berserk. With that happening, the news of you entering the depths of Two World Mountain obviously could not be hidden. The 10 Divine Halls learnt about it very soon, and after some investigation, we discovered that you were not the only one who had entered the depths of Two World Mountain. It was extremely likely that the 8th Divine Hall's leader, Sunran, had entered the depths as well. It would have been fine if the depths of Two World Mountain remained peaceful, but the disturbance just happened to occur. This meant that the Hall Master's whereabouts had been exposed, and it had attracted the attention of all the Domain Lord level life devouring beasts. Afterwards, we waited for a few more days, hoping that the Hall Master could return safely from the depths of Two World Mountain. However, neither the Hall Master nor the 8th Divine Hall's leader, Sunran, received any news. As a result, we had no choice but to report it to the Emperor. As a result, the Emperor led all the Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters into the depths of the Two World Mountain range. Do Wujin told Genshin everything that had happened after he left the 5th Hall in detail. When Genshin learned that all the primordial realm experts from the 10 Divine Halls had come, he was shocked. For the sake of searching for Kuan Tian and Sunran, the 10 sacred halls of the Darkstar race had actually expended so much effort. Even the Darkstar Great Emperor had personally mobilized. "Right, Palace Master? Have you seen the 8th Palace's Palace Master Sunran?" Do Wujin asked. He immediately used a secret technique to inform the others that he had found the Temple Master. Genshin shook his head and said, "I didn't see Sunran, but I sensed his aura a few days ago. I didn't come into contact with him in Two World Mountain, so I don't know where he is hiding." "Then it looks like the chaos in the Two World Mountain range a few days ago was caused by Hall Master Sunran. I wonder how he is right now," Do Wujin said with some worry. At this moment, a long roar rang out from the distance. It came from the Darkstar Emperor. It was sharp and penetrative, forming rings of sound waves that spread out in all directions. It reverberated through Two World Mountain for a very long time. Do Wujin's face changed when he heard the roar. He seemed to let out a sigh of relief. He said to Genshin, "Palace Master, the Emperor has already told us to leave the Two World Mountain range. He's probably found Hall Master Sun Ran as well. Let's leave as soon as possible. We can save some effort for the Emperor if we leave earlier." Afterwards, Genshin and Do Wujin began to fly out of the Two World Mountain range. As all the primordial realm, life-devouring beasts in the mountain range had been drawn over by the Darkstar Great Emperor, Do Wujin no longer had any worries on the way back. He moved as quickly as he could, leaving the region enveloped by the mist very soon and returning to the territory of the Darkstar race. Phew, we're finally out. The suppression of our race in the depths of the Two World Mountain range is just too great. It's just too suffocating. I never want to go back to this god-damned place again. Do Wujin breathed in the air of the Darkstar race in delight. "Kuan Tian, are you tired of living? How dare you run into the depths of the Two World Mountain? Do you know how dangerous it is? Do you know that that place is a forbidden zone for my race?" "That's right," Yan Kai said. Suddenly, a furious voice rang out. The 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui, charged out of the two-world mountain range and arrived before Jianqin with a darkened face. Her sharp eyes were filled with uncontrollable fury as she hurled a torrent of abuse at Jianqin. Jianqin, who was impersonating Kuan Tian, found it difficult to say anything to Feng Shui, who was furious on the surface, but extremely concerned on the inside. He was rather speechless. However, as more and more people emerged from the two-world mountain, Feng Shui could not help but shut up and stand to one side silently. Before long, all the primordial realm experts who had entered the two-world mountain range returned to the territory of the Dark Star race. Jianqin glanced around and discovered that all the Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters had gathered aside from Sunran. Even the 7th Hall Master, Jia Di, happened to be present. However, they did not leave. Instead, they gathered together and stared at the depths of the two-world mountain range. Because, in that place, the deafening roars of the life-sucking beasts were still echoing incessantly. The Dark Star Great Emperor was still engaged in a fierce battle with dozens of life-sucking beasts. Their battle was so intense that the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. Even if they were separated by tens of millions of miles, or even hundreds of millions of miles, they could still feel the earth quaking in the depths of Two-World Mountain. Why hasn't the Emperor come out yet? He's fighting several dozen Region Master level life-devouring beasts all by himself. He must have exhausted a lot of energy. Not only is our strength suppressed in the depths of the two-world mountain range, but we can't recover our energy either. As time goes on, even the Emperor won't be able to outlast the Region Master level life-devouring beasts, said a Vice Hall Master of the 10th Hall worriedly. He was worried for the Emperor's safety. No one said anything after that. Several dozen experts had gathered there. Every single one of them was extremely stern. Their anger was extremely stifling. At the same time, many of them were secretly accumulating power, ready to charge into the two-world mountain range to receive the Dark Star Emperor at any time. The Dark Star Emperor was indeed very strong. He was the undisputed #1 expert of the Dark Star race. However, he was currently facing all the life-sucking beasts in Two-World Mountain. The Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters gathered here were all unsure of what to do. Their worries did not last for too long. After under a minute, the booms in the depths of the two-world mountain range finally stopped. Very soon, a surging figure shot out of the mountain range with lightning speed. The person was the Dark Star Emperor. He had already left the two-world mountain range. Even though he moved extremely quickly, he was completely composed. It was obvious with a single glance that he had retreated not because he could not defeat the primordial realm life-devouring beasts, but because he did not want to engage in a pointless battle with them. Emperor, with the appearance of the Dark Star Emperor, the various Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters who had been waiting anxiously all roused. Their hearts finally settled down. Jianqin looked at the Dark Star Emperor. He had heard of the Dark Star Emperor's name before he had even entered the Dark Star world. He had already learned of the Dark Star Emperor's existence from the Heartless Child. However, this was the first time he had seen the Dark Star Emperor in person after so long since he had entered the Dark Star world. The Dark Star Emperor didn't look very old. He still had the youthful appearance of a 20-year-old. He was wearing a black robe, and his handsome face was filled with an iron-blooded coldness. His expression was calm, and he didn't smile much. Chapter 2876. Greetings to the Emperor. The Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords gathered there all bowed towards the Dark Star Emperor. In order to not vomit, Jianqin, who was disguised as Kuan Tian, could only follow suit. The Dark Star Emperor said nothing. His handsome face was emotionless. He glanced past everyone coldly before locking onto Jianqin in the end. Moreover, his current presence was even greater than when Jianqin sensed it in the Dark Star world. It was even more powerful. This was because the Dark Star Emperor's strength had been suppressed in the Two-World Mountain, so he was unable to unleash his full strength. Now that he had left the mountain, He naturally displayed his full strength. The presence he gave off right now was so powerful that Jianqin felt that it was even greater than some first heavenly layer chaotic primes who had just broken through in the Saint's world. The Dark Star Emperor really is a prodigy to be able to attain such terrifying strength as a ninth heavenly layer infinite prime, Jianqin thought. His understanding of the Dark Star Emperor before had always been limited to the rumors. Now that he had personally witnessed the Dark Star Emperor, he discovered that the Dark Star Emperor was actually 30% more powerful than he had imagined. He even suspected that the Dark Star Emperor could take on second heavenly layer chaotic primes after some difficulty. Even if he was in peak condition, he would not be the Dark Star Emperor's opponent. Emperor, where's Hall Lord Sun Ran? Why don't I see him? Is Hall Lord Sun Ran still trapped in the Two-World Mountain? A Vice Hall Master of the 8th Hall looked around and realized that only his Hall Master was missing. He immediately revealed a look of anxiety. The other Hall Lords clearly discovered Sun Ran's absence as well, which immediately caused the expressions of many people to change. They suddenly felt an ill omen. Everyone, go to the Dark Star Divine Hall. The Dark Star Emperor withdrew his gaze from Jianqin and left with that emotionlessly. With a single step, he appeared 1,000 kilometers away, returning to the royal capital of the Dark Star race. Seeing that Dark Star the Great didn't ask about the situation of the 8th Hall Master, Sun, the other Hall Masters, and Deputy Hall Masters couldn't help but exchange glances. They already had a bad feeling in their hearts when they didn't see Sin come out of Two-World Mountain. At this moment, Dark Star the Great's attitude undoubtedly made the bad feeling in their hearts even stronger. This was especially true for the two deputy leaders of the 8th Palace. Their faces had become extremely ugly, and they hurried towards the imperial city with uneasy hearts. Afterwards, the several dozen primordial realm experts from the 10 divine halls all took off as well. They split into different groups and flew towards the royal capital. Along the way, all the hall masters were asking Jianqin about Sun, the 8th hall master, and the changes in Two-World Mountain during this time. Jianqin had already expected them to ask this, so he repeated what he had said when he saw endless battle a few times. The hall masters all fell silent after hearing that. The situation might not be as bad as everyone imagines it to be. Sun Ran might have left Two-World Mountain long ago. If he's not in Two-World Mountain, we naturally won't be able to find him. Feng Shui said gently. She refused to believe that Sun Ran was dead. After all, not only was he a primordial realm expert, but he was also a hall master. The death of any one of the hall masters of the 10 divine halls was a shocking matter for the Dark Star race, let alone a hall master. Even the death of a deputy hall master was enough to shake up the entire race. This was because there were no battles in the Dark Star world. The only conflicts that could result in bloodshed were caused by cultivators from other worlds. As a result, the deaths of Divine King Realm experts were extremely common in the Dark Star race. However, the deaths of Primordial Realm experts were extremely rare throughout history. The 10 divine halls hovered high above the imperial capital of the Dark Star race. They represented the supreme authority of the Dark Star race. Above the 10 divine halls was a palace that seemed to look down on the world. It stood there proudly as if it was looking down on everyone else. Even the 10 divine halls that represented the highest authority in the Dark Star race had been trampled on viciously. This palace was the most sacred place of the Dark Star race, the Dark Star Divine Hall. In the eyes of cultivators from other worlds, it was the imperial palace of the Dark Star race, the residence of the Emperor. However, it was the spiritual pillar of the entire race, the home of the souls of the entire race. It was named after the entire race, the Dark Star Divine Hall. At this moment, all the Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters of the 10 Divine Halls had gathered in the Dark Star Divine Hall that was above the 10 Divine Halls. They all sat in their respective positions. In this grand hall, there were more than 40 seats arranged in order. Apart from 6 seats that were empty, the rest of the seats were already filled. There were no labels or names on the seats. but the seats of every hall master and vice hall master were fixed. If it were not for Do, Wujin, Bingyuan, and Ta Luo, Jianqin would not have known where Kuan-Tian's seat was. Jianqin sat on the seat and glanced past the 6 empty seats, casually. He could roughly guess who the 6 seats belonged to. Apart from the seat at the very front that belonged to Sun Ran, the 5 empty seats behind him should belong to the 5 other primordial realm experts of the Dark Star race. The 5 primordial realm experts did not hold positions in any of the 10 divine halls. Instead, they were city lords of 5 of the 36 cities of the Dark Star race. The Dark Star Emperor sat on the throne at the very front of the hall. He stared at Jianqin emotionlessly and asked with a voice that was filled with pressure and authority, "Kuan-Tian, why have you entered the Two-World Mountain? Even if you've lost your memories and forgotten the dangers of the Two-World Mountain, haven't the 3 Vice Hall Masters of the 5th Hall told you about it?" The Dark Star Emperor's voice was extremely stern. A few Hall Masters and Vice Hall Masters who were familiar with the Dark Star Emperor's personality could even tell that the Dark Star Emperor's stern voice was filled with fury. It was not an exaggeration to describe his fury as surging. Bingyuan, Ta Luo, and Do Wujin's expressions changed. They looked at each other as they became rather uneasy. They could clearly sense that the Dark Star Emperor was currently in a state of fury that he rarely experienced. "Your Majesty, the reason why I took the risk to enter the Two-World Mountain was because I obtained some memory fragments of a star beast by coincidence in the land of soul destruction. Even though the memory fragments were incomplete, the information within pointed towards the depths of the Two-World Mountain. I entered the Two-World Mountain to search for the memories of the star beast," said Jianqin. "Then what about Sun Ran? Did he enter the Two-World Mountain with you to search for the memories of the star beast as well?" The Dark Star Emperor continued to ask. His voice was rather stern. Chapter 2877. The Dark Star Emperor fell silent. Only after a while did he continue. "Kuan-Tian, tell me everything that happened after Sen's presence leaked out." "Yes, Emperor." Jianqin paused. Reminiscence filled his eyes as if he was thinking about everything that had happened a few days ago. Afterwards, he said, slowly, "Only after Sen's presence leaked out did I learn that he had actually come to the depths of Two-World Mountain. However, I was extremely far away from Sun Ran back then, so I had no idea what exactly happened. I only knew that there were ripples of energy from a battle in Sun Ran's direction. At that time, I guessed that Sun Ran was in trouble and wanted to help him. However, when his aura leaked out, it had already alerted all the domain Lord-level life sucking beasts in the Two-World Mountain. Dozens of domain Lord-level life sucking beasts surrounded Sun Ran from all directions. There were even some life-sucking beasts whose auras were so strong that even I felt scared. Under such circumstances, I naturally didn't dare to go to Sun Ran's side. The only thing I could do was hide carefully and avoid being discovered by the life-devouring beasts. I have no idea what happened to Sun Ran after that. All I know is that not long after, the rampaging domain lord level life sucking beasts in Two-World Mountain calmed down and returned to their own places. As for me, I continued to explore Two-World Mountain through the clues left behind in the incomplete memories of the star beasts. Jianqin said tirelessly as he thought back to the past. His expression remained the same as before, and he was calm inside. He did not reveal any lies at all. No one would have thought that he had made up a story after hearing that. "Emperor, may I ask if you have any clues about our leader?" A vice leader of the 8th Hall stood up. He was worried and concerned. The Dark Star Emperor said nothing. He only flicked his finger, and a space ring immediately flew into the air. Under the support of an invisible force, it hovered in the air. The expressions of all the primordial realm experts gathered in the Dark Star Divine Hall changed drastically when they saw the space ring. At that moment, all of their eyes widened as they stared at the space ring in the air. Their hearts churned. This was because they were not unfamiliar with this spatial ring. It was the one that Sun Ran wore on his finger. The space ring had always been inseparable from its owner. Now that the 8th Hall Master was nowhere to be found, the space ring that he had worn for countless years had appeared here. Everyone was well aware of what this meant. Palace Master. The 2 Vice Palace Masters of the 8th Palace cried out in grief. They stared blankly at the space ring that belonged to Awe-Inspiring. It was hard for them to accept such an outcome. Many of the hall masters in the 10 sacred halls sighed inside. They felt very bitter inside. A hall master had actually died. This had not happened in the history of the Dark Star race for tens of thousands of years. This was an earth-shaking matter to the Dark Star race. It was something that could cause the entire race to mourn. The Dark Star Emperor was emotionless. It was impossible to tell what he was feeling. After a moment of silence, he continued to ask Jianqin, Kuan Tian, since you've explored the depths of the Two-World Mountain for so long under the guidance of the Star Beast's memories, have you gained anything? I've gained something. I found an extremely small world in the depths of the Two-World Mountain with the guidance of the Star Beast's memories. I obtained a small strand of energy that was extremely likely left behind by the Star Beast, as well as some incomplete memories, said Jianqin. What? Kuan Tian, you've actually obtained a strand of energy left behind by the Star Beast? Is that true? The 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui, immediately beamed with joy when she heard that. She asked urgently. The other leaders and Vice Palace Masters temporarily forgot about San Ran's death. They all looked at Jianqin with envy and jealousy. The Dark Star race had quite a lot of records regarding the Star Beast. It was a terrifying beast that had reached the 9th heavenly layer of Grand Prime. Its strength was unimaginable to the current Dark Star race. It was possible to imagine how powerful the energy it had left behind was. At that moment, the eyes of many leaders and vice leaders became rather envious. Even if it was just a tiny strand of energy left behind by the Star Beast, it was enough to change the fate of people at their level. Even a gleam of light flashed through the Dark Star Emperor's eyes. As for why the Star Beasts would appear in the depths of the Two-World Mountain, they no longer bothered to think about it. The Star Beasts were at a much higher level than they could comprehend. As a result, as long as it was related to the Star Beast, they would not have any reason to doubt it, no matter how unreasonable or incomprehensible it was. Their horizons and knowledge were far from reaching such heights. Noticing everyone's burning gazes, Jianqin shook his head with a bitter smile. He said, "There's no need to look at me like that. I'm not sure whether the energy left behind in the miniature world came from the Star Beast or not, because the energy is extremely tiny. It can't even allow me to increase my cultivation by a single level. Haven't you realized that I'm still at the 6th heavenly layer?" Everyone sensed carefully, and the burning light in their eyes immediately vanished. Clearly, they could sense that Kuan Tian's cultivation was still at the 6th heavenly layer. A fortuitous encounter that could not even allow him to break through by a minor level, even if it came from the Star Beast, greatly reduced the interest of the leaders. Clearly, Feng Shui was disappointed as well. Jiadi's heart had indeed tightened when he heard that Kuan Tian had obtained the power left behind by a Star Beast. However, when he saw that Kuan Tian was still at the 6th heavenly layer, Jiadi immediately let out a great sigh of relief. At this moment, Jianqin continued, "However, there's something I don't understand. In the memories of the Star Beast I obtained from the miniature world in the Two-World Mountain, there are memories of the Divine King Grass." Divine King Grass? Go on. The Dark Star Emperor frowned. The Dark Star clan had studied the Divine King Grass for countless years, but the results of their research were nowhere near as useful as the Divine King Grass to the cultivators of the outside world. Chapter 2878. When the leaders heard what Jianqin said, their eyes immediately lit up slightly. However, that was all. If they only found a way to use the energy within the Divine King Grass, it would be useless to infinite primes like them. However, it would indeed be of great help to those below the primordial realm. At the very least, it would prevent the divine king grass from becoming useless trash in their hands. This was because what restricted their breakthroughs was not energy, but their comprehension of the ways of the world. The remnant will of the grand exalt of the wood spirit had affected the laws of the world to a certain extent in the region where the Dark Star race resided. Or perhaps it had set down new laws, which suppressed the Dark Star race and made it difficult for them to comprehend the laws of the world. However, their absorption of energy was not affected at all. Kuin-Tian, you must know that the divine king grass is truly useful to us. It's not the energy within the divine king grass, but the fragments of laws within it. Have you obtained the method to absorb the fragments of laws from the astral beast's memories? Feng Shui asked. She stared at Jianchen as the light in her eyes flickered with eagerness. With that, all the other leaders and vice leaders looked at Jianchen. Their eyes were burning with eagerness. All of them could vaguely sense the laws within the high-quality divine king grass. However, after all these years, there were only a handful of people who could truly benefit from the divine king grass. Even if they did, the effects would be minimal, unable to increase their strength by much. In the end, the high-quality divine king grass had basically become useless trash among the Dark Star race. It was tasteless, but it was a pity to throw it away. Only in the hands of cultivators from the outside world would it be useful. If the method Kuin-Tian obtained from the astral beast's memories really could develop the high-quality divine king grass so that they could absorb the fragments of laws within it, it would be a matter of great joy to them, no, to the entire Dark Star race. Even though they would not be able to break through the suppression of the grand exalt of the wood spirit race, preventing them from reaching chaotic prime, it would make it easier for them to break through the 9 layers of infinite primes. As a result, Feng Shui's question immediately ignited the desire of all the primordial realm experts in the Divine Hall. Their eyes all burned with desire. Now that the matter had reached this point, the atmosphere in the hall, due to Sen's death, had been diluted. Before their own interests, the various hall lords and vice hall lords all chose to temporarily forget about Sen's death. All they could think about was how they could increase their strength quickly. Jianchen smiled confidently. Since I've taken the initiative to talk about the divine king grass, it'll obviously be useful to us. Hall, Lord Feng Shui is right. I have indeed obtained a method from the astral beast's incomplete memories that can allow us to comprehend the power of laws within the divine king grass successfully. However, the memories are incomplete, so I still need to explore and study them. Kuin-Tian, is what you said true? Kuin-Tian, please don't lie to us. If you really can do it, you'll be a great contributor to our Dark Star race. With that, the Dark Star Divine Hall immediately erupted into an uproar. All the Hall Lords and Vice Hall Lords present struggled to remain calm. They all ravished with joy. Even the Dark Star Emperor's eyes shone brightly. A sliver of yearning appeared on his face. He had thought even further. The Dark Star race was about to hold a great ceremony. Once the ceremony succeeded, the Dark Star race would be able to break through the curse that prevented them from becoming chaotic primes. Once he became a chaotic prime, his cultivation would definitely skyrocket with Kuin-Tian's method. He would be able to reach the 9th heavenly layer of chaotic prime very soon. Once he became a 9th heavenly layer chaotic prime, his abilities would become even more numerous. At that time, he would be able to grasp all the ancient forbidden techniques that he could not practice due to his insufficient cultivation. As his cultivation increased, he might even be able to use his own power to guide the remaining power of the Dark Star Grand Exalt to directly resist the will of the Wood Spirit Grand Exalt. At that time, it would only be a matter of time before the Dark Star race broke free. Currently, he needed to reach the 9th heavenly layer of chaotic prime for all of this. Kuin-Tian, how much Divine King's grass do you need for your research? The Dark Star Emperor asked. He did not doubt Kuin-Tian at all, as the Dark Star race had been at peace for far too long. It had been so long that even an emperor like him had given up on all his suspicions and vigilance. Of course, the most important reason was that none of them would have thought that the Kuan-Tian they knew had already been replaced by someone else. I need a lot, and it's best if it's high-quality divine king's grass. If I use low-quality and medium quality, the effects will be minimal, said Jianchen. All right then. Since you've grasped the method from the astral beast's memories, you need to do everything you can to complete it. Do not slack off at all. The other 9 divine halls need to cooperate fully with Kuan-Tian, the Dark Star Emperor ordered. The Dark Star Great Emperor had ordered the other 9 sacred halls to cooperate fully. Naturally, he meant that they would do everything they could to provide what they needed. This was because every single one of the 10 divine halls possessed quite a lot of high-quality divine king's grass. Yes, Emperor. The 8 hall masters all answered. They were extremely straightforward and did not show any dissatisfaction at all. High-quality divine king's grass was not particularly rare among the Dark Star race. Moreover, they were unable to unleash its effects even if they obtained it. If Kuan-Tian really did come up with a method to comprehend the laws within, it would be a fortuitous encounter that could allow their strength to skyrocket. Jianchen was overjoyed when he saw how the matter progressed so smoothly. Originally, he had only come up with the idea of obtaining the astral beast's memories from the depths of Two World Mountain, but he had never thought that all the primordial realm experts of the Dark Star race would firmly believe him. Instead, they agreed to help him so easily. This was definitely a pleasant surprise. However, as soon as he thought about the limited value of high-quality divine king's grass in the Dark Star race, Jianchen understood. Perhaps the reason why they agreed so straightforwardly without any hesitation was because divine king's grass was basically worthless in the eyes of these hall masters. In the end, the sorrow and heaviness from Sen's death was easily washed away by Jianchen's use of the divine king's grass. Jianchen returned to the 5th hall after leaving the Dark Star Divine Hall. He sat on the throne as the hall master composedly. Dou, Wujin, Taro, and Bingyuan stood side by side below him as they reported what had happened in the past few days. Chapter 2879. Jianchen waved his hand, and the scarlet, glazed fruit flew into his hand. Perhaps it was the only god-tier heavenly resource that had been brought in from the outside world in countless years. He could not help but smile meaningfully. Palace Master, please consume the scarlet, glazed fruit quickly. This fruit might be able to restore the Palace Master's lost memories. Bingyuan said immediately. Bingyuan said, restoring the memory of the Palace Master was an extremely important task for the current 5th palace. However, Jianchen had no intention of consuming the scarlet, glazed fruit. He played around with the fruit in his hand as he slowly said, "It is indeed a god-tier heavenly resource. The cultivators from the outside world in the 100 Holy City have not disappointed me. They actually have the means to break through the rules of Grand Exalts and send a god-tier heavenly resource into the Dark Star world. Palace Master, you may not know this, but this scarlet glazed fruit was not sent to our Dark Star world when it was at the God tier. When it arrived in our Dark Star world, it had not reached the God tier yet. Instead, it was a clan called the Celestial Thunder Clan from the 100 Holy City that used jades containing the laws of time to nurture the scarlet glazed fruit to the God tier," Bingyuan explained. "Jades containing the laws of time?" Jianchen murmured. A sliver of interest appeared in his eyes as he said, "A crystal of the laws of time that can nurture a heavenly resource to the God tier in a short amount of time without being restricted by the passageway between the two worlds? It seems that I will need to personally make a trip to the 100 Holy City. Palace Master, although the jades are miraculous, I don't think the cultivators from the outside world have many of them." Bingyuan clasped his hands. He had been to the 100 Holy City before. When the Celestial Thunder Clan took out the jades that contained the time seed, he could tell from the expressions of the several dozen representatives that only the Celestial Thunder Clan could take out such jades. Moreover, the amount they could take out was clearly not a lot. If the Palace Master wanted to obtain such a large amount of jades, it was basically impossible. However, before Bing Yuan could finish his words, Jianchen raised his hand to stop him. We have never come into contact with the top families of the outside world. As for how deep the foundations of those top families are, we can only hear bits and pieces of information from some low-level cultivators. Since we don't know much about them, we shouldn't jump to conclusions so easily. Palace Master is right. It is Bing Yuan who is too ignorant. Bing Yuan was ashamed. Jianchen was about to continue speaking when his expression suddenly changed. He stopped talking and looked at the entrance of the temple. A few breaths later, a graceful figure slowly walked into the 5th Divine Hall. The person who had come was the 10th Hall Master, Feng Shui. Even though she looked like a middle-aged woman in her 40s, she still retained her charm. Not only did she retain her youthful beauty, but she also had a seductive charm that could cause many men to do primitive and impulsive acts in front of her. Kun Tian, have you not recovered your memories from the trip to the Two-World Mountain? Feng Shui asked. She looked at Jianchen with a complicated and disappointed look. From Jianchen's expression and eyes, she could clearly see that Kun Tian still did not remember her, nor did he remember the past. Jianchen shook his head. Welcome, Hall Master Feng Shui. May I ask how Kun Tian can be of service to you? Feng Shui stared at the familiar yet unfamiliar Kun Tian sitting on the throne. In the depths of her eyes there was a deep affection that she hid. Kun Tian, do you really have a way to make the power of laws contained in the superior divine king grass work on us? I'm not very confident, and I can't give you a guarantee now because my memories are incomplete. I have not inherited some key details. Everything still needs to be experimented and explored, Jianchen answered. I heard that you need a large amount of superior divine king grass for your experiments. Is the stockpile of your 5th hall not enough? Feng Shui asked. The light in Jianchen's eyes flickered, and he shook his head gently. It's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. With a flip of her hand, a space ring silently appeared in her hand. She directly tossed it to Jianchen and said, This is all the superior divine king grass that my 10th hall has accumulated over the years. There are over 28,000 stalks. I'll give them all to you now. Jianchen caught the space ring that Feng Shui tossed to him. He remained calm on the surface, but he was extremely excited inside. 28,000 stalks of superior divine king grass was enough to create 28,000 divine king realm experts in an extremely short amount of time in his hands. Moreover, they would be complete divine king realm experts, unlike the fake divine king realm experts that the organizations in the 100 Saint City could nurture using the 100 Calamity divine king pill. They would only have a lifespan of 100 years, and they would only be at divine king realm. He had already taken away all the stock of superior divine king grass in the 5th divine hall. There were over 30,000 stalks of superior divine king grass. Now that he had over 28,000 stalks from Feng Shui, he possessed a terrifying amount of 60,000 stalks of superior divine king grass. This was equivalent to 60,000 divine king realm experts. If this number was placed in the saint's world, it would be an extremely terrifying number. Across the 49 Great Plains and 81 Great Planets of the saint's world, there was not a single peak organization that possessed such a terrifying number of divine king realm experts. Jianchen sucked in a deep breath and clasped his fist towards Feng Shui in gratitude. Feng Shui did not stay for long either. She left after delivering the superior divine king grass. However, the number of people who had come to visit the 5th divine hall today was far less than Feng Shui alone. Soon after Feng Shui left, the hall master of the 2nd divine hall, Anna, arrived as well. Kun Tian, how confident are you in obtaining the superior divine king grass that you mentioned in the Dark Star divine hall? After a simple exchange of greetings, Anna asked eagerly. He stared at Jianchen closely, clearly showing his interest in this matter. I can't say how confident I am right now because I'm missing a few crucial details from my memories. However, I can perfect it through constant Experimentation, said Jianchen. Anna fell into a short period of silence. The light in his eyes flickered, and after a while of hesitation, he said, Kun Tian, can you announce the method so that our second divine hall, 8th divine hall, and 10th divine hall can research it together? I think, with our combined strength, we'll definitely be able to make a major breakthrough in a short period of time. Our 4 divine halls have always been on the same side. We've always been at a disadvantage against the 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th, and 9th divine halls. Coupled with Sen's death, the 8th divine hall's strength has plummeted. It'll be even more difficult for our 4 divine halls to fend off the other 5 divine halls now. If we can use the superior divine king grass to increase our strength in a short period of time, it'll be the only way for us to make up for our disadvantage. Jianchen remained composed. He said steadily, I've thought of this method before, but it was difficult to achieve in the end. Why is that? Second Palace Master Anna asked in confusion. Because the memories I obtained from the Star Beast are incomplete. I can understand some things, but I can't describe them in words. As a result, I'm the only one who can experiment with the divine king grass right now. Jianchen paused. Furthermore, I believe that if we can really use the laws within the divine king grass, it'll no longer be a matter for our 4 divine halls. It can't be monopolized by our 4 divine halls because it's already at a level where it can affect our entire race. If we dare to keep it for ourselves, the Emperor will probably be the first to come after us. Chapter 2880. Anna had left the 5th hall. However, his visit to the 5th hall this time was clearly only one of the reasons why he wanted to see if he could learn how to use the divine king grass from Jianchen. The other reason was obviously to carry out the Dark Star Emperor's orders, which was to provide Jianchen with everything he needed so that he could figure out how to comprehend the laws within the divine king grass in the shortest amount of time possible. As a result, when he left the 5th hall, he left all the high-quality divine king grass the 2nd divine hall had stored up in the past few years to Jianchen. There were close to 30,000 stalks in total. The 5th divine hall had originally stored over 30,000 stalks of divine king grass. Afterwards, Feng Shui gave over 28,000 stalks of high-quality divine king grass from the 10th hall to Jianchen, coupled with the 30,000 stalks from the 2nd hall master. Jianchen possessed a total of 90,000 stalks of high-quality divine king grass. If the organizations in the 100 Saints City learned about this, who knew how frightened they would be? Moreover, this was not the low-quality divine king grass that the people of the 100 Saints City came into contact with. It was high quality. The organizations in the 100 Saints City still had no idea about the existence of high-quality divine king grass. They did not even know that divine king grass was split into high, medium, and low quality among the Dark Star race. Jianchen clenched the space ring that an urna had left behind tightly as he sat on the throne. He struggled to remain calm as he stared at the 30,000 jade boxes that were neatly stacked inside. Only after a while did he take in a deep breath. He slowly calmed himself down. His gaze seemed to pierce through the obstructions of the 5th divine hall. He looked at the other 7 of the 10 divine halls of the Dark Star race. A strange light flickered in his eyes. I never thought that I would be able to obtain 90,000 stalks of high-quality divine king grass so easily. This is something that people would fight to the death over in the Saints' world. And this is just the stock of the 2nd, 5th, and 10th temples. If my calculations are correct, each of the other 7 temples should have at least 20,000 to 30,000 in stock. Jianchen thought to himself, the memories of the astral beast he had obtained in Two World Mountain were fake. The fact that he could use the divine king grass to comprehend the law fragments within was also fake. His purpose in doing so was to collect as many high-quality divine king grass as possible. Then he could use these high-quality divine king grass to cultivate more divine king realm experts. Dou Wujin, Ta Luo Bingyuan, the 3 of you will personally go to the remaining 7 sacred temples and tell them that this temple master needs a large amount of high-grade divine king grass. Ask them to provide it, Jianchen said to the 3 vice temple masters. Yes, temple master. Dou Wujin, Taluo, and Bingyuan accepted the order and were about to leave. Wait, you have to stress that this matter concerns the future of all the temple masters and vice temple masters of our 10 great temples. At the same time, it affects the fate of the entire race. Tell them to pay attention to this matter. Jianchen added. He thought about how there were many open and covert conflicts between the 10 divine halls in the Dark Star race. The faction that the 5th temple master belonged to had clashed with the other 5 divine halls aside from the 1st temple master for many years. This was to prevent the other 5 divine halls from becoming cautious or disobeying the Dark Star Emperor's orders, which was why he had given them such an order. This was because he was trying to elevate the importance of the divine king grass to an extremely high level. Once it reached a level where it could affect the fate and future of the entire race, the various conflicts between the 10 divine halls would become insignificant. At the same time, he made it clear that this matter was related to the future of all the hall masters and vice hall masters of the 10 divine halls. He tied the 10 divine halls together, clearly hinting to the opposing camp that if he succeeded, he would naturally not forget about everyone. In order to obtain as much divine king grass as possible, Jianchen had indeed put in a lot of effort. After Dou Wujin, Taluo, and Bingyuan accepted the order, they immediately visited the other 7 divine halls in person as vice temple masters and passed on Jianchen's words without missing a word. Of the 7 divine halls, the 8th divine hall, which was under Sen's jurisdiction, agreed the most readily. This was because they were on the same side as the 5th temple, the 2nd temple, and the 4th temple. Due to Sen's death, the 8th divine hall was temporarily without a leader. As a result, after Bingyuan's visit, the only 2 vice temple masters of the 8th divine hall took matters into their own hands and handed over all the divine king grass of the 8th divine hall to the 5th temple. In total, there were more than 20,000 stalks. In the 7th divine hall, Deity sat on his throne with an ugly expression. He stared coldly at Dou Wujin's gradually receding figure, but his heart was heavy. The 3 vice temple masters of the 7th temple were also not very happy. They stood below with complicated expressions, mixed with envy, jealousy, and intense unwillingness. After a long while, Vice Temple Master De Fu sighed deeply and said, Kuan-Tian's luck is enviable. He actually received the star beast's favor twice in succession and obtained its memories. The first time, not only did he successfully step into the 6th heavenly layer, but his battle prowess also increased to a terrifying level. He clearly just broke through not long ago, but it seems like he broke through many years ago. And the second time, it's even more incredible. He actually obtained some memories that can allow him to comprehend the law fragments within the divine king grass. If he can perfect them, enough. Before De Fu could finish, Deity roared angrily, rudely interrupting De Fu. He roared, Don't mention the star beast in front of me. Don't mention the divine king grass in front of me. De Fu immediately stopped talking. He and the other 2 vice temple masters looked at each other and saw a deep sense of helplessness in each other's eyes. The strength that Kuan-Tian had displayed in his battle with Deity had already made them wary. He had only just reached the 6th heavenly layer, but he could already fight Deity, who had stepped into the 6th heavenly layer for many years, to such an extent. If Kuan-Tian reached the peak of the 6th heavenly layer, who knew how powerful he would be? At that time, it would be hard to say whether their temple master could suppress him as much as before. Now he had even grasped the method to use the divine king grass. If he really succeeded in discovering the method, what right did the 7th temple have to contend against the 5th temple? Even if the 5th temple announced the method to use the divine king grass, the 7th temple could forget about defeating the 5th temple. Go, take 5,000 stalks of high-quality divine king grass and send them to the 5th temple. After a long period of silence in the imposing 7th hall, Jia Di finally gave the order after a fierce struggle in his mind. But as soon as she finished speaking, Jia Di seemed to have lost all her strength and collapsed on the throne. He did not care about the divine king grass. It was not particularly precious among the Dark Star race either. What truly made Jia Di feel powerless was the future of the seventh temple. He knew that the rise of the fifth temple was probably unstoppable. Chapter 2881. The 10 Dark Star sacred halls were not ranked according to their rankings. The higher-ranked sacred halls were not necessarily stronger. Take the 5th and 7th sacred halls, for example. Even though the 5th sacred hall was ranked higher than the 7th sacred hall, the 5th sacred hall had been suppressed by the 7th sacred hall for countless years. Of course, there was an exception to this, and that was the first divine palace. The first divine hall truly ranked first among the 10 divine halls of the Dark Star race, because the hall master of the first divine hall was the only 7th heavenly layer infinite prime in the Dark Star race. The 7th heavenly layer was equivalent to late infinite prime. Although it was only a minor cultivation level higher than the 6th heavenly layer, there was indeed a huge difference between the 6th and 7th heavenly layers. The leader of the first divine hall was an expert only second to the Dark Star Emperor in the Dark Star race. This was because the Dark Star race did not have an 8th heavenly layer expert. Aside from the Dark Star Emperor, who was at the 9th heavenly layer, the second strongest expert was the leader of the first divine hall, who was at the 7th heavenly layer. The remaining 9 hall masters were all at the 5th or 6th heavenly layer. At this moment, in the first divine hall, a gray-clothed old man sat on the palace master's throne. Even though he was sitting, it was not difficult to tell that he was an extremely short person from his rather small figure. Moreover, he was extremely old. The wrinkles on his face had already gathered into a clump. His withered, gray-white hair seemed to have lost enough life force, falling off in large patches. It was as if his head was already half-bald, revealing a large portion of his mirror-like shiny scalp. The old man was the leader of the first divine hall, Qiu Changsheng. Below Qiu Changsheng stood 4 primordial realm experts. 3 of them were the 3 vice leaders of the first divine hall, while the last one was the vice leader of the 5th divine hall, Do Wujin. According to Old Man's knowledge, the 2nd and 4th halls have already given all the high-quality divine king's grass to your 5th hall. Combined with your own stock, you have close to 100,000 high-quality divine king's grass in your possession right now. Is that not enough for your 5th hall master's research? His old voice was extremely hoarse, and he seemed to be powerless. That's right, said the leader of the first hall who sat on the throne. The leader of the longevity hall must have already learnt that the astral beast's memories our leader inherited are incomplete. In order to make up for the missing information, we'll naturally need to conduct tremendous amounts of research, and the consumption of high-quality divine king's grass during the research will definitely reach an astonishing level. Even all the high-quality divine king's grass stored up by our 10 divine halls won't be enough. Otherwise, our leader wouldn't have ordered us to visit you, said Do Wujin. Clearly, he felt respect for the first hall master from the bottom of his heart, so he lowered himself extremely. Whatever. It's Kuan Tian's fault for obtaining such a fortuitous encounter in the Two-World Mountain. The method he has grasped now is directly related to the future of all the primordial realm experts of our clan. Before something so important, the only thing we can do is cooperate with him as much as we can. I hope Kuan Tian can make up for the missing part of the method. Do Wujin, you can return first. Old Man will send people to deliver what Kuan Tian needs later, said Qiu Changsheng, leader of the longevity hall. I'll be taking my leave first then. Do Wujin bowed deeply towards the first hall master before leaving the first divine hall. Sing Fu, go collect all the high-quality divine king's grass stored up by our hall. Qiu Changsheng immediately said to one of the vice leaders below after Do Wujin had left. The vice leader, called Sung Fu, took a step forward and bowed, Leader, our hall has 43,000 stalks of high-quality divine king's grass stored up. May I ask how many we need? Send them all to the 5th hall. Qiu Changsheng waved his hand and said powerlessly, All of them? Leader, it seems like the high-quality divine king's grass will be of great use in the future. Are we really going to give them all to the 5th hall? Why don't we send some over and keep some for ourselves? Asked the buff cautiously. There's no need. The high-quality divine king's grass is useless to us. After all, we've tried many times over the years, but we can't use the law fragments inside to improve our strength. It's better to give them all to Kun Tian. Hopefully, he'll be able to make up for the missing part of the method soon. Whether the high-quality divine king's grass will become a hot commodity in our clan or remain as useless as before, it all depends on Kun Tian. Over the past few days, the high-quality divine king's grass from the 10 great temples had constantly fallen into Genshin's hands. In the end, Genshin easily had more than 100,000 stalks of divine king's grass in his possession. The 1st hall had given him the most divine king's grass, 43,000 stalks, while the 8th hall had given him 30,000 stalks of divine king's grass. The 3rd, 4th, 6th, 7th, and 9th halls had always been at odds with the 5th hall, so they had given him the least divine king's grass. Even with the 5 halls combined, they had only received around 30,000 stalks. Now, the number of high-quality divine king's grass in Genshin's space ring had reached a total of 190,000 stalks. Faced with such a large number of high-quality divine king's grass, Genshin's initial excitement and joy gradually turned into numbness. Indeed, he had become completely numb. Even if the amount of divine king's grass in his hands multiplied again, it would still be very difficult to stir up his emotions. This was because once the amount reached a certain level, it would become a mere number. Of course, after receiving so much high-quality divine king's grass from the 10 halls, Genshin knew that he had to do something no matter what. What he did was very simple. He locked himself in a secret room and put on an act of taking out some high-quality divine king's grass to study. Of course, this research would not yield any results. It might not even be effective. However, a large number of damaged divine king's grass would be thrown out of the secret room every day. Genshin had even painfully taken out over 1,000 stalks of divine king's grass to destroy them every day in order to prove how quickly he consumed the divine king's grass during his research. The damaged divine king's grass was naturally handed over to Bing Yuan and the other 2 Vice Hall Masters to deal with. Genshin's idea was very simple. He wanted to empty the stores of the 5 opposing halls. He estimated that there were at least 70,000 to 80,000 stalks of divine king's grass in the 5 opposing hall stores, or even more. At the same time, it would serve as a distraction and reduce the suspicions of others. Otherwise, it would be strange if he did nothing after collecting so much high-quality divine king's grass. The news of him consuming over 1,000 stalks of high-grade God King grass in a single day naturally reached the people of the other 9 divine halls as soon as possible. Very soon, it reached the 8 hall masters, which immediately left them speechless. At the same time, it made them even more convinced that Kun Tian had obtained the fragmented memories of the Star Beast in Two World Mountain, especially the information about the high-quality divine king's grass in the fragmented memories. Genshin stayed in the secret room for 3 days before coming out. The first thing he did when he came out was to summon the 3 Vice Hall Masters and directly ordered, "After 3 days of research, I've made new discoveries. The fragments of laws in the high-quality divine king's grass were bestowed by the power of the ancestors after they fell. Therefore, in order to awaken the silent fragments of laws in the high-quality divine king's grass, I'm afraid we'll need something with the aura of the ancestors. I've thought about it for a long time. I'm afraid there's nothing more suitable than the sacred land of the ancestors. Do Wujin, Taluo, the 2 of you immediately go to the remaining 9 halls and tell them that I need the sacred land of the ancestors." "Hall Master, The fifth hall still has some of the sacred land of the ancestors in storage. It was originally reserved for future exchanges with the warriors of the outside world. If you need it, I'll go get it for you, Dowoojin said. Chapter 2882. Yes, Temple Master. We'll inform the 9 great temples right away. They didn't dare disobey the Temple Master's orders, so Dowoojin and Ta Luo had no choice but to take their leave. The two of them then set off to visit the 9 great temples again. Bingyuan, how much of the ancestral sacred land does our fifth hall have? Jianchen asked Bingyuan after Ta Luo and Dowoojin left. Temple Master, our fifth hall currently has about 1.5 caddies of ancestral sacred land. Bingyuan cupped his fists. Only 1.5 caddies? Why is it so little? Jianchen frowned. Compared to the high-grade divine king grass, the ancestral sacred land was pitifully small. Temple Master, I'm afraid you don't remember. The ancestral sacred land is different from the divine king grass. In our clan, the various grades of divine king grass can grow endlessly. Every 100 years, we can produce quite a bit. In addition, the high-grade divine king grass is almost useless to our clan. So over the years, we've naturally accumulated a lot of high-grade divine king grass. Not only is the ancestral sacred land rarer than the divine king grass, but it also takes a very long time to form. In addition, the most important reason is that the ancestral sacred land is extremely valuable in the eyes of cultivators from the outer realms. Once our clan sells the ancestral sacred land, the cultivators from the outer realms will often offer an extremely high price. They will fight over the ancestral sacred land until their heads bleed. Therefore, our clan will take out a portion of the ancestral sacred land to trade with the cultivators from the outer realms every once in a while in exchange for what our clan needs. As a result, our 10 great temples don't have too much of the ancestral sacred land stored away. Bingyuan patiently explained to Jianchen. After all, the temple master before him was still in a state of amnesia. He had completely forgotten everything that had happened in the past. Without waiting for Jianchen to speak, Bingyuan took the initiative to retrieve all the ancestral sacred land stored in the treasury and respectfully presented it to Jianchen. The ancestral sacred land was placed in a high-grade jade box, isolating all of its aura. It was impossible to sense any aura from the outside. Jianchen gently opened the jade box. As soon as he opened it, a small crack, a surge of vital energy immediately poured out of the jade box. This pure vital energy gathered together and formed a dazzling bright red light. Jianchan remained composed. He was not surprised by the pure vital energy in the jade box at all. This was because he had seen something even more powerful in the depths of the desolate plain. It was the fleshly core of Gusta, one of the 3 dark gold ape kings of the ancient era's great apes. Compared to Gusta's sacred, fleshly core, the blood chi power contained in the ancestral Holy Land was insignificant. The only difference was that the level of the vital energy within the ancestral sacred land was extremely high. At the same time, the vital energy seemed to contain the presence of the ways. After studying the blood-red ancestral sacred land in the jade box, Jianchen carefully placed it into his space ring. He asked Bingyuan, "How much of the ancestral sacred land did you use to trade with cultivators in the outside world in the past?" "Temple Master, the ancestral sacred land has been around for an extremely long time. As a result, every time we open it up to the public, we only take out an extremely small amount. Roughly every century, our clan will trade 2 to 4 ounces of the ancestral sacred land to cultivators in the outside world," Bingyuan replied. Jianchen was secretly surprised when he heard that. The value of the ancestral sacred land had completely exceeded his imagination. He had never thought that cultivators in the outside world would only be able to obtain 4 ounces of the ancestral sacred land from the Darkstar clan every century. Currently, he possessed 1.5 caddies of the ancestral sacred land. In other words, it would take at least 400 years for cultivators in the outside world to obtain this amount of ancestral sacred land from the Darkstar clan. Bingyuan hesitated for a long time before he finally gathered his courage and said through gritted teeth, "Hall Master, the Dao birth fruit that the great emperor planted in the herb garden is in the process of evolving. During this period, the consumption of divine crystals in the herb garden has increased by several dozen times. The divine crystals that our fifth hall has accumulated over the years are simply unable to meet the demand of the herb garden. The cultivators from the outside world in the 100 Saint City will often offer extremely high prices for the ancestral sacred land. As a result, I would like to ask the Temple Master to leave some ancestral sacred land for us to trade with cultivators from the outside world so that we can meet the demand of the garden." Jianshan raised an eyebrow and asked casually, "How many divine crystals can one tael of the ancestral sacred land be exchanged for?" "At the very least, several 100 million supreme, grade, divine crystals. If the competition between cultivators in the outside world is intense, one tael of the ancestral sacred land can even be sold for over 1 billion supreme, grade, divine crystals," Bingyuan said. His eyes shone slightly as well. Clearly, even he was tempted by the amount of supreme, grade divine crystals. Although the people of the Darkstar clan were unable to absorb the energy within divine crystals for their own use due to the different types of energy, divine crystals were the only way to maintain the supply of energy to the garden. This was because all the heavenly resources in the garden came from the saints' world, so they also needed the energy of the saints' world to maintain them. Even though Jianshan was prepared for this, he was still taken aback when he heard this number. This was because he was holding a fortune worth several billion or even several 100 billion supreme, grade, divine crystals. He had looted the treasuries of a few peak organizations on the cloud plane, but the amount of divine crystals he had obtained was nowhere near this number. However, he also understood that only the Darkstar clan would exchange something as precious as the ancestral sacred land for divine crystals. In the saints' world, Jianshan did not doubt that the ancestral sacred land would be a priceless treasure. It would not be enough to buy it no matter how many divine crystals there were. Basically, it would be exchanged for treasures of similar value. However, the ancestral sacred land had already fallen into his hands, so how could he exchange it for divine crystals? He said, "I will think of a way to get the divine crystals. Let's go. Pay a visit to the 100 Saints City with me." Many people had already gathered in the 100 Saints City's pantheon. All the prodigies who managed everything in the city had gathered together once again. Aside from Chu Jie, Gong Rui's, Kong Feiying, Zhou Ji Zhao Wenbin, and the young master of the Ashwolf clan, Jin Hong, who had obtained the Grand Exalt's legacy, all the other prodigies had appeared in the pantheon. They didn't talk to each other. Their faces were very ugly, and there was also a strong anger that was suppressed among them. However, even though their emotions were extremely intense, none of them said anything. The entire pantheon was silent. It was extremely depressing. All of this was because an uninvited guest had come to the Pantheon Hall. Clearly, the various organizations in the Pantheon Hall did not welcome this uninvited guest very much. However, due to various reasons, they were forced to personally receive this guest who possessed a rather special status. And the reason why so many of them were angry was because of the guest's position at the moment. The representatives of the various organizations all sat around a huge round table in the Pantheon. There was no hierarchy, which implied that they were all on equal footing. However, at this moment, this uninvited guest moved a chair over and sat in the center of the round table, 3 meters above the ground. His attitude was equivalent to trampling all the prodigies in the Pantheon beneath his feet. As a matter of fact, it could even be understood as him sitting on all the prodigies in the Pantheon. Unfortunately, the various organizations in the 100 Saint City did not dare to speak up against this person's arrogance. This was because the uninvited guest was one of the 3 vice leaders of the 7th Divine Hall, and Lai. Chapter 2883. Against a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime. Even if all the organizations in the 100 Saints city worked together and used everything they had, it would be impossible for them to fend off a fourth heavenly layer infinite prime. As this was the dark star world, all the high-grade, secret treasures of their clans could not be brought in. As a result, these proud prodigies who had never taken infinite prime seriously in the Saints' world had no choice but to submit obediently. They had to deal with the situation carefully. Even if they were furious, they had to hold it in. This was because all of them understood one thing. Once they were killed in the territory of the Dark Star race, no matter how powerful the clan behind them was, they would not be able to avenge them. What do you think? I have to tell you that my time is limited. I don't have that much time to waste here. Every organization has to offer our 7th Divine Hall 10 billion supreme grade divine crystals every 100 years in exchange for our goodwill. This is an opportunity that our 3 Vice Hall Masters had to beg the Hall Master for painstakingly to obtain after so much difficulty. Don't waste it for nothing, and Lai said indifferently as he crossed his legs in the air. He seemed to look at the interesting expressions of the prodigies in disdain. Instead, he studied the Divine Hall by himself. His gaze seemed to be able to pass through the obstruction of the Divine Hall, allowing him to clearly see the situation of the 100 Saint city. This is a very impressive city. When this city was built in the past, the huge clan behind you must have gone to great lengths to complete it. Just the clan in this city has far more than just 1 billion supreme grade divine crystals. After all, supreme grade divine crystals can be reproduced in the resource-rich Saints world. They are truly inexhaustible. In other words, 10 billion supreme grade divine crystals may sound like a lot, but it's nothing in the boundless Saints world. In the past 100 years, let's not even talk about how much you've gained from exchanging the resources from my clan. Just the things you've obtained in 2 World Mountain are invaluable. If that's the case, isn't it very worth it to use 10 billion supreme grade divine crystals to exchange for 100 years of peace? And Rand spoke casually, as if 10 billion divine crystals were nothing more than that. However, there was a burning gaze hidden in the depths of his eyes. 10 billion divine crystals was definitely a significant number to the 7th Divine Hall because this amount of divine crystals could only be obtained from quite a few ancestral lands in the past. Most importantly, if the 7th Hall obtained this amount of divine crystals, they would definitely be able to resolve their current situation. None of the prodigies in the Divine Hall said anything. Their faces were terrifyingly sunken. This was because 10 billion supreme grade divine crystals was an extremely great number even to the clans behind them. The Vice Hall Master of the 7th Hall wanted 10 billion supreme grade divine crystals right off the bat, and he promised that he would not cause them any trouble for 100 years. Off was not just asking for a price. Ha 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 ha, I never thought Vice Hall Master and Lai of the 7th Hall would actually be here. Looks like I'm still a step too late. At this moment, a great laugh rang out, followed by a great rumble. The tightly shut door of the Pantheon Hall had been smashed to pieces by a great force. The powerful shock waves wreaked havoc, sending all the prodigies in the Pantheon Hall flying. They slammed into the wall behind the Pantheon Hall in an extremely wretched manner. Even the huge round table in the Pantheon of Gods was torn apart by the shock waves of the energy. In the blink of an eye, the Divine Hall was reduced to a mess. A white-clothed man suddenly barged into the temple of all gods. The white-clothed man looked to be in his 30s. He had a delicate face and was somewhat refined. He looked like a scholar. However, the presence he gave off was the same as in Lai's. He was a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime, and Lai squinted his eyes slightly, and his face immediately became rather ugly. I was wondering who it was. Looks like it's the Vice Hall Master of the 6th Hall, Si Wuqing. Si Wuqing, hasn't your 6th Palace always been disdainful of the 100 Saint City? For so many years, except for a few occasional transactions, you have always been indifferent to the 100 Saints City. Why did you change your attitude today? Why did you, the deputy palace master, come here personally?" At this moment, all the prodigies who had been blown away by the ripples of energy climbed to their feet. They looked at the shattered doors of the divine hall, and their hearts immediately sank. During this period of time, their 100-saint city had been protected by the 5th hall. Coupled with the fact that the 7th hall no longer caused any trouble for the 100-saint city, they gradually let down their guard. A gap had always been opened in the protective formation, allowing workers to pass in and out to maintain the operations of the 100-saint city. However, they had never expected the vice hall master of the 7th hall, Enlai, to enter through the door silently without any regard for his status. He directly arrived in the divine hall and demanded an exorbitant price of 1 billion supreme, grade divine crystals. Enlai was still fine. After all, he did not use force, so there was still room for negotiation. However, the one who had come was not very friendly. He had destroyed the doors of the divine hall as soon as he arrived. His intentions made all the prodigies in the divine hall feel uneasy. At that moment, they even began to wonder if the Dark Star race had already undergone a major change, and if the 5th hall had already lost all of its dignity. Had the promise made by the 5th hall master devalued to the point where any vice hall master could trample on it at will? The vice hall master of the 6th hall, Si Wuqing, smiled slightly and said slowly, "Indeed, our 6th hall has always been indifferent to the existence of the 100-saint city, because, in our eyes, the 100-saint city is just an ant. We can't be bothered with them. Moreover, at times this ant can provide us with some things we need, so we are naturally happy to have them. It's just that the situation today is a little different. Because of that reason, our 6th hall's consumption of divine crystals has increased greatly. Although there are some other little ants serving our 6th hall, the amount of divine crystals they bring is too little. If it was in the past, it would have been enough. But now, those divine crystals can't keep up with the consumption. As a result, we can only come to the 100-saint city," said Si Wuqing. "Of course, most of the people who work with your 6th hall are chaotic primes in the saints' world. Even if there are a few organizations with grand primes, they're only at the bottom of the peak. They can't compare to the organizations in the 100-saint city," Enlai said expressionlessly. Then he paused for a moment before continuing. "Si Wuqing, I wonder what the 6th hall is prepared to offer in exchange for divine crystals." Chapter 2884. Enlai's face darkened slightly. Originally, he had already prepared himself for the possibility of obtaining all the benefits of the 100-saint city. This was because he was certain that although not all of the top forces stationed in the 100-saint city would take out a large sum of divine gems in exchange for the peace of the 100-saint city, at least 1/3 of the forces would be willing to do so. Even if it was only 1/3 of the forces, the amount of divine gems accumulated would be a huge number. Not only could it completely cover the sudden increase in divine gems expenditure of the 7th hall due to the herb garden, but there would also be a lot of divine gems left over to trade with other divine halls or reserve resources for future use. After all, to maintain the herb garden, the consumption of divine gems would be endless. No matter how many divine gems were poured into the Dark Star clan, they would never complain about having too many. However, he never expected that Si Wuqing would appear at this time. It was obvious that he also wanted a share of the cake. This would undoubtedly reduce Enlai's expected gain by half. This naturally made Enlai very dissatisfied. "Si Wuqing, our 7th divine hall has been in charge for the past 1,000 years. All matters of the Dark Star race should be handled by our 7th divine hall. Your 6th divine hall's actions have crossed the line," said Si Wuqing. Enlai said with a sullen face. He was not willing to give up such a big piece of cake, no matter what. Even if the 6th hall and the 7th hall were on the same front, in the face of such a huge benefit, there would be friction, especially in a situation where the divine crystal reserves of the various shrines were running low. This piece of cake was even more precious. Yes, in the past 1,000 years, the seventh hall has been in charge of the Darkstar clan. But why did I hear that not long ago your seventh hall master personally went to destroy 100 Saint City, but was forced to stop because of the fifth hall master's appearance? Your seventh hall even left some leeway for our old enemy, the fifth hall. How can you be so ruthless and selfish in the face of your longtime ally? Is our alliance not as good as the seventh hall and the fifth hall? Or should I say, which side is the seventh hall on? There was a faint smile on Si Wuqing's face. From the beginning to the end, he had a calm and collected demeanor. He continued, "And Lai, I don't want to waste my breath with you here. We, the sixth hall, only have one request. We want half of the divine crystals offered by the 100 Saints City." Then Si Wuqing glanced at the end of the Temple of the Gods, at the various forces of the 100 Saints City who were now gathered together in a sorry state. He said indifferently, listen carefully, "As Lai said earlier, every clan must provide us with 10 billion supreme divine gems as a reward. As Lai said earlier, the seventh temple will no longer target you during this period of time, nor will it obstruct any of your activities. If not—" Si Wuqing's face suddenly turned cold. Chilling killing intent shone from his eyes as he said icily, "Then don't even think about showing your faces in the Darkstar race." The killing intent of a primordial realm expert immediately caused the temperature of the entire hall to plummet. The prodigies gathered there felt like they had been plunged into ice as they shivered. They were not cowardly, nor were they afraid. Instead, it was a normal reaction when they faced the killing intent of a primordial realm expert with their strength as divine king. In the Pantheon Palace, all the sky prides looked ghastly pale. 10 billion supreme divine gems for 100 years was a sum that many of their forces could not afford. As a top force, they were indeed very wealthy, but their consumption was also very high. And Lai and Si Wuqing's request was equivalent to forcing many of them into a desperate situation. However, they just happened to not dare to object, as the status they took pride in was worthless in the Darkstar race. If they died, it would be a pointless death. No one would avenge them. Esteemed leaders, I have something to say, but I'm not sure if I should say it. At this moment, Lei Jun of the Celestial Thunder Clan stood up. He did not possess the arrogance that a disciple of a peak clan possessed. Instead, he showed some respect and was extremely careful. Si Wuqing looked at Lei Jun, and his lips slowly curled into an evil smile. He said, "Your clan seems to be called the Celestial Thunder Clan, right? It said that you forcefully pushed a heavenly resource to God tier through special means. Not bad at all. My clan has always admired the capable organizations in the outside world. If you have anything to say, just say it." Lei Jun paused for a moment before he braced himself and said, "Since you already know about the God-level heavenly treasure, you must know that the God-level heavenly treasure was specially prepared by the Sky Thunder Tribe for the fifth hall." "Yes, that's right. Of course I know about that." And Si Wuqing stared at Lei Jun meaningfully. "The leader of the fifth hall has promised that if we can provide him with a God-tier heavenly resource that can heal the soul, the fifth hall will protect us. Now that we have already provided the divine-tier heavenly treasure, according to the agreement, we are already under the protection of the fifth hall. Now that the sixth and seventh hall are trying to kill us, will the fifth hall—" Towards the end of his sentence, Lei Jun's tone was a little hesitant. There were some words that could not be said too clearly, but any normal person would understand the meaning behind them. "The fifth hall? Now you're still hoping for the promise of the fifth hall?" Si Wuqing stared at Lei Jun as if he was looking at an idiot, and said, "If it was in the past, the fifth hall would have been able to protect you because the 4 great divine halls barely had the qualifications to contend against us. But now, the 4 great divine halls have no chance of contending against us." After pausing for a while, Si Wuqing felt that his words were not intimidating enough, so he continued, "To tell you the truth, since the Sixth Hall has decided to intervene in the matter of the 100 Saint City and has joined forces with the Seventh Hall, the Fifth Hall has completely lost the ability to protect you. At this moment, even if the leader of the Fifth Hall, Kuin Tian, was here, he would not dare to say anything in front of the two divine halls. It's laughable that you're still hoping for the protection of the Fifth Hall. You're really ignorant. Is that so? Why didn't this palace master know that your sixth and seventh palaces have such capabilities? You actually made this palace master not dare to say a single unnecessary word in front of you. This palace master wants to see for himself if your sixth and seventh palaces really have such capabilities. However, just as Si Wuqing finished speaking, a cold and mocking voice came from outside. The appearance of the voice immediately caused Si Wuqing's face to stiffen. He was no stranger to the owner of the voice. It was the leader of the Fifth Hall, Kuin Tian, whom he had just mentioned. In the Pantheon, Enlai's face changed again and again. He suddenly turned his head to look in the direction of the Pantheon. Chapter 2885. The arrival of the Fifth Hall Master immediately made the group of heaven prides in the Pantheon Divine Palace, who were filled with despair and helplessness, feel as if they had grasped at a life-saving straw. Every one of them revealed an excited expression. Their previously gloomy faces instantly became extremely excited. This was because the leader of the Fifth Hall had already become their greatest pillar of support in the Dark Star race. Even if they knew that if they could not provide the God-level treasure that the Fifth Hall Master needed, they would not be able to obtain his protection. But in their hearts, their recognition and trust of the Fifth Hall Master were still very strong. After all, the Fifth Hall's Hall Master had already saved their lives. Furthermore, he had even risked the consequences of starting a war with the Seventh Hall's Hall Master to save them. With this kindness, the geniuses of the 100 Saints City trusted the Fifth Hall Master even more. On the other hand, the Seventh Hall and the Sixth Hall not only snatched their 100 Saints City, but also almost destroyed them. As for the Sixth Hall Master, he had smashed the door of the Temple of the Gods as soon as he arrived. His attitude was arrogant and condescending, completely treating them as fish on the chopping board. He was full of malice. Compared to the two, the Fifth Hall Master was more like a living bodhisattva, who was worth relying on and trusting. Esteemed Hall Master, you finally come. You have to uphold justice for us. Our 100 Saint City is clearly protected by you, Hall Master. Anyone who harms our 100 Saint City is harming you, Hall Master. However, the Sixth and Seventh Halls clearly know of our relationship with the Fifth Hall, yet they still threaten us without giving the Fifth Hall any face at all. They even want us to hand over 10 billion supreme, grade, divine crystals every 100 years. They're simply not leaving us any way out. Lei Jun was the most excited among them. He was also the first to speak impatiently, trying to worm his way into being friends with the Fifth Hall Master. This was because the Heavenly Thunder Tribe had taken out a God-level treasure as promised to the Fifth Hall. Logically speaking, the Heavenly Thunder Tribe was already under the protection of the Fifth Hall. With such a powerful backer, he finally had some confidence in facing the 10 divine halls of the Dark Star Tribe. As for Si Wuqing's disdain and mockery towards the Fifth Hall, Lei Jun merely treated it as a boast. After all, from the current expression of the Fifth Hall Master, one could tell at a glance that the Fifth Hall was not as bad as Si Wuqing had described. A sliver of coldness immediately flashed through Si Wuqing's eyes when he heard what Lei Jun had said. Intense killing intent surged in his heart. In his eyes, all foreign cultivators were ants, creatures that he could crush as he wished. If they were obedient and constantly provided benefits to the Dark Star race, he could allow them to move about freely in his territory. But at this moment, the worthless ant in his eyes dared to provoke him and the Fifth Hall Master. This was something that he could not tolerate no matter what. You are courting death. Si Wuqing spat out these 2 words coldly. Just as he was about to kill Lei Jun, his expression suddenly changed. This was because at this moment a powerful aura that was like a mountain suddenly descended, pressing down on his entire body. Even the circulation of energy in his body showed signs of stagnation. Si Wuqing turned his head with difficulty and stared at Kun Tian. Fear filled his eyes. After all, not only was Kun Tian a Hall Master, but he was also a sixth heavenly layer infinite prime. In terms of status and strength, Kun Tian was greater than him. However, he seemed to think of something soon afterwards. The fear in his eyes immediately vanished, and he calmed down. He said sternly, "Lord of the Kun Tian Hall, what are you trying to do?" Not only does this person disrespect his seniors, but he even dares to use his lowly status to sow discord between the 10 divine halls of our Darkstar race. Shouldn't he be killed? Does the Lord of the Kun Tian Hall want to protect someone like that? Si Wuqing showed no fear at all. He stared straight at Jianqin, as if he would not budge until he gave a satisfactory explanation. This was because he was extremely certain that the 5th Hall's strength had plummeted once again after losing the 8th Hall's forces. They no longer had the courage to face them directly like before, or they would just be asking for humiliation. And Lai stood to one side and said nothing. He did not plan on taking part in the conflict between Si Wuqing and the 5th Hall Master. His fear of the 5th Hall Master did not diminish in the slightest following Sen's death. This was because he had personally witnessed the madness of the 5th Hall Master. The 5th Hall Master who had lost his memories was even more terrifying than before, and he was even more difficult to provoke. Not only had his strength increased by leaps and bounds, but even his personality seemed to have reached an extreme. Once he was forced into a corner, he would really fight to the death. In the face of such a lunatic, even the 7th Hall Master, Jia Di, who was much stronger than the Kun Tian Hall Master, had no choice but to give in. Jianqin did not speak. He walked in the Temple of the Gods at an ordinary pace and arrived in front of Si Wuqing unhurriedly. His powerful aura was still pressing down on Si Wuqing, and he raised his hand to slap Si Wuqing's face. Slap! Suddenly, a crisp sound was heard. The sound was so loud that it was extremely ear-piercing in the Temple of the Gods. Si Wuqing, who was caught off guard, was sent flying by Jianqin's slap. Jianqin's slap was so powerful that it sent Si Wuqing's entire body flying into the air. Half of his face was smashed and blood rained down. The Temple of the Gods suddenly fell silent. The crowd of heaven's prides gathered here looked at Si Wuqing, who was flying in a parabola in the air. Their hearts were beating wildly, and everyone was stunned. As the saying went, "Don't hit someone in the face." In the end, not only had the 5th Hall Master slapped Si Wuqing's face, but the person who had been slapped was a Vice Hall Master of great status as well. This had an extremely great impact on the minds of the Heaven's Prides. Even though primordial realm experts were only infinite primes, they were equivalent to elders in peak organizations with grand primes. They possessed a certain level of status, so they should be treated with a certain amount of respect. In the Darkstar world, primordial realm experts were people who stood at the apex of the pyramid. They were supreme existences, yet they had been slapped in the face so mercilessly. All the Heaven's Prides in the 100 Saints city were rather stunned by this sight. Chapter 2886. For a moment, and Lai's throat actually became rather dry as he looked at the 5th Hall Master, who stood there coldly without any hesitation. The biggest reason why he dared to come to 100 Saint City today was because of the death of Temple Master Sunran, which caused the strength of the 5th Hall's camp to plummet. They no longer had the ability to compete with them. In his opinion, the 5th Hall in such a situation would make concessions when facing the problem of 100 Saint City, as long as it was not a serious matter that harmed their own interests. In the end, he did not expect the 5th Palace Master to not play by the rules at all. When his camp was already at an extreme disadvantage, not only did he not restrain himself, but he became even more rampant than before. He even slapped a deputy palace master in the face as soon as he arrived. This was an extremely humiliating matter. Even if there was no enmity between them, this action would lead to great hatred. He's gone mad. He's gone mad. Kuan Tian has completely gone mad. And Lai could only curse in his heart. The domineering and condescending attitude displayed by the fifth hall master had caused him to want to retreat. The sixth hall master, Si Wuqing, was stunned as well. He had been sent flying by Jianqin's slap, and when he landed on the ground, he actually forgot to climb back up. His face was blank as he still had not returned to his senses. After 2 breaths of time, Si Wuqing finally reacted. His body was still lying on the ground in the same position, but his entire body was trembling violently. His eyes had also become extremely red at this moment, with blood vessels all over them. In the next moment, a monstrous rage mixed with a terrifying killing intent suddenly emanated from his body. He leaped up from the ground, and his face instantly became extremely ferocious. He let out a beast-like roar. Kuan Tian, you dare to humiliate me like this? I will make you pay the price. Vice Hall Masters were also great figures among the Darkstar clan. Even though there was a certain difference in status between them and the Hall Masters, the difference was not as great as imagined. After all, they were all infinite primes. They were all at the same level of cultivation, not to mention that Si Wuqing was a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime. His strength was only a single level lower than some Hall Masters who were still at the 5th heavenly layer. Boom! Immediately, energy erupted from Si Wuqing, and the pressure of the primordial realm flooded the surroundings. He directly attacked Jianqin with bloodshot eyes, swinging his sword towards Jianqin decisively. Jianqin was indifferent. He was composed and composed. However, a tremendous pressure erupted like a volcano, crushing down on Si Wuqing with an even more terrifying pressure than before. Si Wuqing staggered, almost falling to the ground. His face paled. The energy on the sword that he used to swing towards Jianqin flickered. The power of his attack had actually been suppressed to the greatest extent by Jianqin's presence. In the end, the sharp tip of the sword was caught between Jianqin and Jianqin effortlessly. Ding! Afterwards, there was a crisp sound. Jianqin flicked his fingers gently, and the tip of the sword immediately trembled violently as if it had suffered a heavy blow. A rebounding force was transmitted to Si Wuqing's right hand, numbing his entire right arm. However, Jianqin did not plan on sparing Si Wuqing just like that. He said coldly, "You're just a Vice Hall Master, yet you dare to call me by my name. You deserve to be punished for offending your superiors." As he said that, he took a step forward and approached Si Wuqing. He used his presence to suppress Si Wuqing before slapping Si Wuqing's face again, sending him flying. This time, he struck the other half of Si Wuqing's face. Not only did the powerful force reduce Si Wuqing's face to a bloody pulp, but even his head cracked. Si Wuqing was filled with hatred. He roared out furiously, wanting to fight back like a beast. However, Jianqin was much more powerful than he had imagined. Not only was he unable to fight back against Jianqin with a strength as a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime, but he could not even dodge under the suppression. This 100 holy city was taken back by this Hall Master from Jiadi. Only this Hall Master can decide the life and death of this 100 holy city. The other temples don't have this qualification. As the 6th Vice Hall Master, not only have you come to my territory to show off, but you've even spoken rudely to me. This is unforgivable. Jianqin said coldly. He arrived before Si Wuqing in a flash, and before Si Wuqing could stand up, Jianqin directly kicked him in the back viciously. With the sound of bones breaking, Jianqin's kick shattered Si Wuqing's spine, going all the way to his ribs. He basically crushed all the bones in Si Wuqing's upper body to pieces. All his organs were torn to pieces. Si Wuqing grunted as he vomited large mouthfuls of blood and bits of organs. This time, he had truly suffered a heavy blow. Kuan Tian, why? How dare you treat me like this? Si Wuqing vomited blood a few times as he said hoarsely. His face was currently pale and his hair was a mess. He no longer possessed his previous bearing. Not to mention you. Even if your sixth hall master came and dared to provoke me, I would still beat him up. Jianchen said coldly with a fearless spirit. He then lifted the mud-like Si Wuqing from the ground and threw him out of the 100 Saint City. Remember, the 100 Saint City is under my protection. Without my permission, anyone who dares to commit outrages here will not be spared. Outside the 100 Saint City, Si Wuqing, who was like a puddle of mud, fell to the ground in an extremely sorry state. Because he was thrown out too quickly, he slid forward for a few miles before finally stopping. He immediately coughed up blood incessantly. His spine was broken, and there were only a few intact bones left in his upper body. Without the support of his bones, he couldn't stand up for a while. He could only lie on the ground and take some healing pills from his space ring to slowly recover. Kuan-Tian! He let out a beast-like roar as the hatred and killing intent in his heart boiled to the extreme. He rested for a moment, and when the shattered spine in his body had taken shape, he immediately flew into the air and left this place shakily. And Lai's heart immediately chilled after personally witnessing how Jianchen had trampled on Si Wuqing. He discovered that he had still underestimated the fifth hall master's insanity. He had actually humiliated a vice hall master into such a miserable state over such a small matter at a time like this. It made his spine shiver slightly. This was because something like this had never happened to a primordial realm expert in the long-known history of the Darkstar race. At this moment, Jianchen looked at Enlai. His gaze became extremely sharp, and he said coldly, "Enlai, have you also come to the territory under my protection to commit outrages?" Chapter 2887. At this moment, under the gaze of so many heaven's prides in 100 Saint City, Enlai no longer cared about losing face. With an apologetic and gentle smile on his face, he lowered his tone and explained to Jianchen in a humble manner to clarify the misunderstanding. After that, he didn't stay for a moment longer and left the Pantheon Temple dejectedly, flying away from 100 Saint City. Although the attitude he showed in front of so many heaven's prides in 100 Saint City was a very shameful thing in Enlai's eyes and had lost his dignity as a deputy temple master, when he thought of Si Wuqing's fate, he couldn't help but shudder. Forget it. Although it's a little embarrassing, compared to Si Wuqing's fate, it's actually nothing. Enlai comforted himself in his heart. At the same time, he was also very wary of the fifth temple master's unbridled arrogance. I have to go back as soon as possible and report what happened in 100 Saint City to the temple master. The fifth temple master's style of doing things is becoming more and more overbearing. He doesn't consider the consequences at all. If he continues to act like this without restraining himself, I'm afraid an unprecedented conflict will break out between the 10 divine temples of our clan. And Lai looked a little worried. The current Kuan-Tian made him feel wary and a little scared at the same time. A deputy temple master with an illustrious identity had been slapped in front of a group of cultivators from the outside world. This was too vile and the consequences were too severe. With a heavy heart, Enlai flew rapidly in the sky and arrived at Dark Night City at his fastest speed. He then returned to the 7th temple through the teleportation formation in Dark Night City. In the 7th temple, Jia Di was sitting on the throne with a worried expression, worrying about the divine crystals. Below him, Deputy Temple Master Defu stood with his hands by his side and said, "Temple Master, the speed at which the Tao-bearing fruit absorbs the energy of the divine crystals has increased by several times again, and this speed is still increasing. The time our divine crystals can last is getting shorter and shorter." "How long can it last?" Jia Di asked with a slight headache as he sat on the throne. Their Darkstar race had never lacked divine crystals as much as they did today. In just a little over a month, they had used up enough divine crystals to keep the garden running for 1,000 years. This was because the amount of energy required to reach high-quality god tier heavenly resources was just too astonishing. Moreover, the origin energy of the Dark Star race was different from the origin energy of the Saints' world. It could not be used to nurture God-tier heavenly resources. They could only absorb energy from divine crystals. This naturally caused the consumption of divine crystals to be extremely shocking. Less than 10 days. Defoe paused for a moment before adding, furthermore, the duration of 10 days is based on the Tao birth fruit's current rate of energy absorption. After tomorrow, the Tao birth fruit's rate of energy absorption will be even faster than today. On the third day, it might even increase. Therefore, our divine crystals can't even last for 10 days. How many divine crystals have the warriors we control provided us? Jia Di asked again. Each of the 10 great holy temples cooperated with some external forces that were weaker than the 100 Saint City, and they exchanged various benefits. We've provided quite a lot, but it won't last for more than a few days, said Defoe. Jia Di leaned back on his throne and rubbed his temples as if he had a headache. He said, "We all miscalculated. Who would have thought that the amount of energy consumed by the Tao-bearing fruit to advance to the high-grade God rank would be 10 times, or even 100 times more than when it advanced to the middle grade? The other heavenly resources won't be able to use that much. We can only rely on Enlai now. I hope his progress in the 100 Saints City goes smoothly." At this moment, the teleportation formation outside the 7th Divine Hall flashed. Enlai had returned from the 100 Saints City. Jia Di immediately became interested. Before Enlai could step into the hall, he asked about whether the trip to the 100 Saints City had gone smoothly. Very soon, Jia Di learnt about everything that had happened in the 100 Saints City. His face immediately changed, and he became extremely stern. There was also fury as he growled. Kuan Tian has actually gone overboard. He has crossed the line. He has crossed the line. How can a mighty vice leader be humiliated like this? The vice leader of the 6th Divine Hall, Si Wuqing, returned with his heavily injured body. He currently stood in the hall with a face covered in blood. His eyes were bloodshot as he radiated chilling, killing intent. He described how the 5th Hall Master, Kuan Tian, was so domineering and condescending in the Pantheon Divine Hall. Kuan Tian has gone too far. A vice leader of our 6th Hall has actually been humiliated by him. Not only has he slapped Wuqing's face, but he's slapping our 6th Hall's face as well. If we don't get our revenge, what will happen to our 6th Hall's dignity? The second vice leader of the 6th Hall was also furious as he spoke furiously. He resembled Si Wuqing slightly. He was Si Wuqing's elder brother, Si Wuming. He was also a 4th heavenly layer infinite prime. Aside from Si Wuqing and Si Wuming, there was a 3rd vice leader. His name was Augustine, and he was a 2nd heavenly layer infinite prime. He was furious as well. Out of the 3 vice leaders of the 6th Divine Hall, 2 were 4th heavenly layer infinite primes, and 1 was a 2nd heavenly layer infinite prime. Their strength had completely surpassed the 5th and 7th halls. The leader of the 6th hall, Owen, was a 6th heavenly layer infinite prime. He had reached 6th heavenly layer before the 7th hall master, Jia Di. The 6th palace master, Owen, sat on his throne expressionlessly. His eyes were cold as he said, coldly, "Go and invite the 3rd palace master, 4th palace master, 7th palace master, and 9th palace master here. The humiliation that Si Wuqing suffered must be avenged. Kuan Tian must pay the price for his actions. The dignity of the 6th palace cannot be humiliated." Jianchen, who was still in the 100 Saint City, had no idea that the leader of the 6th hall had already gathered many organizations to deal with his actions. However, even if he knew, he would not care at all, as he did not fear any of the enemies in the Dark Star race aside from the Dark Star Emperor. Moreover, he was tempted to stir up internal strife among the Dark Star race as soon as possible. If he could use this opportunity to kill a few more Hall Masters, it would obviously be for the best. The various prodigies gathered in the sacred hall all thanked Jianqin sincerely. All of them were grateful. Jianqin's forceful attitude made them trust the leader of the fifth hall even more. Jianqin remained calm. He glanced past everyone slowly, and when he discovered that Jin Hong was no longer among them, he immediately became relieved, because he knew that not long after, the 100 Saint City would probably encounter an unprecedented calamity, and even the entire city would be purged, causing rivers of blood to flow. Naturally, it couldn't be any better for Jin Hong to take this opportunity to leave.